The previous basket is under review.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast. I am your host, Eamonn Brennan of buzzer at eamonnbrennan.com. I'm also of Basket Under Review, the home of the best and most in-depth college basketball writing and content you'll find anywhere. Deep content style work on college hoops on a daily basis, really in-depth stuff. And it's been a thrill to see the website develop as it has in a very short space of time. We're ramping up for the start of the season, which is coming soon. It's part of the reason why we've been doing previews these last few weeks. We've done the Big East, we've done the ACC, and now we're doing the Big Ten with our guest today, Joe Jackson. But before we get to Joe, really quickly, do want to urge you to go check out Basket Under Review. If you sign up, you support this show and the other free content we put out in the world, stats with Will and Jim and Scout Team, with Kevin Sweeney and Eric Fawcett, as well as you get access to all the writing that's on the site. You also get access to the Discord, which is a fantastic college basketball community full of people who are just as obsessed with the sport as you probably are if you're listening to this show. I also want to take a moment really quickly, as we always do, to thank our sponsor, Homefield. Homefieldapparel.com is the world's best place to get college sports apparel. They just dropped some new corduroy hats that I've been eyeing up. I'm very interested in a new corduroy hat. I'm not sure which color I'm going to go with. There's a lot of interesting options, but I was looking at the website literally just yesterday thinking I can go for a new hat. Might be time for a new hat. But anyway, thank you to Homefield for sponsoring us. It's a great company, and we're really proud to have them on board. So thanks again, Homefield. Go check out homefieldapparel.com. Okay,
I believe,
we're here with Joe.
Just jumping in really quick, believe this is a Homefield shirt. Definitely, we'll just shout them out as well. Got this at the Big Ten tournament last season.
Oh, there it is. See, you came prepared. I'm wearing a soccer jersey, but I have worn Homefield actually a couple times, like not even really realizing it until I sat down. I was like, oh yeah, this is a Homefield shirt too. So that's good.
There you go.
Yeah, you're ready. We're here. You just heard him. We're here with Joe Jackson of Feed the Post. It's a Substack. It's a YouTube channel. It is extremely in-depth college basketball writing, particularly on the Big Ten, but you cover other teams and scouting reports and that sort of thing as well. But Joe's Substack at Feed the Post. It's feedthepost.substack.com, right? I have that right?
Correct.
Nailed that one in the first go. We don't have to edit that. You're off the hook there, Corey. But no, I want, I didn't know if it was feedthepost dot, whatever, or if it was a different URL. But you've been doing some, in-depth sort of newcomer breakdowns for teams in the Big Ten. And so I thought you would be a really good guy to have on to talk about the Big Ten broadly, but also dig in. We can preview. We're going to do what we did the past couple of weeks with John Fanta and last week with Brian Geisinger on the ACC, breaking the league down into tiers. Some of my tiers are a little silly. Some of them Joe might disagree with. Some of the placements of teams he might push back on, but that will make for more interesting listening. So before we do that, Joe, I just kind of wanted to talk to you, like as I've done with most of the guests that have been on the show thus far, and starting off the conversation, but just like, what is your college basketball origin story? How did you get sucked in so deep that you're doing these incredibly detailed breakdowns in the summertime and in the fall on every newcomer of note in the Big Ten? With Joe, if you look at Joe's stuff on his YouTube and it's on his Substack too, it's film analysis, it's deep into the numbers, it's X's and O's, tactics, all that good stuff of trying to understand what players are going to be good, what teams are going to be good, and why. And so how did you get to the point where you're so dialed into this stuff?
Yeah, so I think probably similar to a lot of people that do this type of work. Loved basketball always, grew up playing basketball, all that stuff. Obviously was not good enough to play at the next level, but still wanted to be around the game in some capacity and just kind of figure out a different way. I actually started purely as just kind of an analytics page, just posting different things there. And we're getting very specific really quick, but there's an NBA podcast called Dunker Spot. And I randomly found it as I was packing to move for an internship, 3-hour podcast previewing like the second round of the NBA playoffs. And that's where I really got exposed to like, oh, there's this whole side of like X's and O's and like detailed analysis, analytics obviously involved in that, but it's like, oh, that I like that. Like I want to kind of look at that too. And then truthfully, just was kind of like, right there was always this thing in the back of my mind of like, oh, like I could maybe make something out of this. I knew there was less competition at the college level and kind
Mm-hmm.
of being more unique. During this time, I was also I was at Purdue. That's where I graduated from, and so kind of in the midst of it is where I started really. I started specifically as a Purdue kind of page. Like I did film breakdowns for every single game, things like that. Um, and then kind of just have expanded it recently to the entire Big Ten, where, like you said, it's more detailed analysis, it's more X's and O's, things of that nature. Where I don't, my goal is to kind of bring things that maybe you don't always see every day to kind of the space that of people that do cover college basketball.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that was a motivating factor for me early in my career as well, as like starting off with a kind of a newspaper background, writing kind of newspapery stories, and then you get, into, for me at the time, blogging and Ken Palm and getting, John Gasway and getting exposed to this world of people who are looking at the sport. It was right around the time of sort of the Moneyball evolution too in baseball, and a lot of Nate Silver's work in Baseball Prospectus and that whole side of things. And suddenly being like, there's a totally different way to understand the sport. Something as simple back in the day, it sounds super quaint now, but like points per game might not be the best indicator of how good a player really is on a possession by possession basis, right? And that was revolutionary
Yeah.
at the time. And so I think you've seen this evolution in the understanding of the sport and what you're doing and what the folks at Basket Under Review are doing, of taking the numbers stuff that I think a lot more people are comfortable with now. You get a lot of Ken Palm quotes on ESPN broadcasts or whatever, CBS broadcasts of college basketball games. You get a lot of sort of indications of advanced metrics, very broadly speaking, in the mainstream, and taking that level of understanding of the sport and then really drilling into, yeah, but the reason why this team is so efficient at X, Y, and Z thing is because they run this set, or the reason they protect the rim so well is because they're in drop, and they're doing different. Here are the tactics that create those numbers that you're seeing in the end product. So yeah, it's a fascinating sort of evolution. I do feel like I talked to Brian Geisinger about this a little bit last week. There's more and more of an appetite for that sort of stuff, and Dunker Spot is a great call out of the kind of stuff at the NBA level that has existed for a while, and I think is there's a lot of potential for that in college basketball, and that's already been proven out. And I think one thing that I keep coming back to with college basketball that makes it especially interesting for this kind of discussion, and we'll see it in the Big Ten as we go through. You're going to have a team like Iowa in the Big Ten this year. You're going to have a team like Illinois in the Big Ten this year, and they are going to be doing vastly different things on a possession by possession basis, different tempos, completely different emphasis, and who's going to have the ball and where and why. And I think that makes the sport especially interesting just to watch. If you just want to show up and watch and you only care about the tournament or a few weeks in February and early March and then the tournament, that's cool because, you'll show up and watch and you'll see a team like Wisconsin, maybe not so much last year, but traditionally Wisconsin or Virginia under Tony Bennett or whatever. And you'll see a team like Alabama. And these are both high major teams over various years with chances of winning a national title or whatever, that just do completely different things and a totally different approach to the game that in the NBA, it's a little bit more homogenized. Maybe there's more subtle differences that you can pull out, but the college basketball contains multitudes. And so it is, I think, especially fun to do this kind of breakdown understanding of it, because there's so many different directions you can go and coaches doing all kinds of different things, or at least at different speeds.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the Big Ten, especially this season, you're really starting to see, you'll start seeing more and more diversity, right? There's the stereotype um, of the Big Ten being very big centric, dump it down into the post, kind of slower, styled. And there's definitely going to be that still within the conference. Don't get me wrong, but you kind of go through a lot of who the top players are: Braden Smith, Bennett Sturts, Donovan Dents, right? Like, just to name a few, it leans a lot more towards the guards this year, especially. And I think from somebody that religiously watches the Big Ten, I'm excited to see a little bit even more kind of guard oriented. We've seen that shift over like I think the past couple of years, and right, we'll talk through all the teams, so we'll hit on all the players, but there's guys, the Bruce Thorns, Jackson Shellstads, like those types of guys as well, where it's right there's just a lot of depth, and I'm excited to see kind of the differences that come with it.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. All right, so one big picture question that I wanted to ask you, just to kind of set the table, because it's something that I feel like, again, we're going to get super into the nitty gritty and the details of these teams, but I think if you ask a casual fan, it's something that, again, like my test for this is like my group chat with my 12 high school buddies that I play fantasy football with. When they're talking about college basketball and the Big Ten, what is the thing they think of? And it's like, and that most of them went to Big Ten schools, and they get to March and they, typically refuse to pick a Big Ten team to win the title because it just hasn't happened for so long. And they're just like, yeah, the Big Ten doesn't win NCAA tournaments. It's just not what happens. There's been conversation about this over the years. I have always kind of taken the view that it's not, there's no like cause for it. It's just kind of one of those statistical quirks in college basketball, especially given how close lots of teams have gotten in the last 5, 7, 10 years. I think Purdue and the Wisconsin team that was a few buckets away against Duke and stuff like that. But do you think there has been, and maybe this is changing, maybe it didn't exist in the first place at all, do you think there has ever been anything structural about the way the Big Ten plays basketball, recruits talent, puts a product on the floor that makes it more difficult for them as a league to win national titles compared to the conferences that have been more successful in doing so in the past 25 years?
Like, I think there maybe could be marginal stuff with the lack of elite guard talent from time to time, and maybe some of the reliance on more kind of low post bigs. But this was a good excuse for me to deep dive into some of the stats, because I've been wanting to when I was prepping for this. The Big Ten has the second most championship appearances in the last 24 years. So the last 24 seasons since the Big Ten won. They have the second most tournament championship appearances. Now they are 0-8 in those. And so it's like, yes, they aren't winning that game, which is the most important game, obviously, by far. But you go 0-8, you have the second most appearances out of any conference. Like, that means you're doing something good. You're putting yourself in the spot. They also have, in that time span, the second most Final Four teams, only behind the ACC for both of those. And so I think there may be little things you can nitpick, and I do think the Big Ten's adjusted a bit since. But like, they've had somebody in the championship game 33% of the time, since winning their last national championship as a conference. So, right, some of it I think is just unfortunate luck. Whereas the Big East, they are 8-0 in national championship games in that span as well. Like, sometimes just kind of how the things fall.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think there might have been at some point sort of the Big Ten stereotype you alluded to earlier. Maybe at some point you could make the argument that, like, yeah, the way the Big Ten played as a league within itself and sort of the type of teams that it tended to produce, big, physical, hulking, used to a lot of contact, typically slower than the national average for the most part. There was a kind of a collective league identity of a stylistic identity. I don't think that's been the case for at least a few years now. I think you've seen all kinds of different styles in the league, and I think Illinois has been a great example of really kind of changing almost on a yearly basis. But Brad Underwood's teams have typically played pretty fast, and they've had they've had Kofi Coburn and teams built around him, but they've also, as we're going to get into, look to space more and get up and down more and play from the perimeter more. The freedom of movement in the game overall, I think you've seen it play out in the Big Ten. It's just not the same kind of rock fights that you used to get from a random, Wisconsin Penn State game on a Tuesday night in January or whatever. It's just not the same league anymore, and I think probably to its benefit. And the league's also bigger, and you've got, UCLA is in the league now, and Oregon and USC. And so it's a totally different beast just in modern college basketball terms. So it's hard for me to say that there's any kind of, you know, through line stylistically. But it's one of those conversations that, like, again, I hear this every winter just from like casual fans, I feel like, and it's a question that will like come up in mailbags, and I never really have a good idea for it. And I figured, maybe I'll ask Joe, maybe he'll have a theory, or maybe he'll just tell me this is silly. And I kind of feel like it's like, you're right. Like, getting deep into the tournament, you just kind of, games go your way or they don't. And maybe you make the shot or you don't, or Coach K doesn't chew out the refs to within an inch of their lives in the Wisconsin national title game in 2015, and that game doesn't turn, and Grayson Allen gets 3 buckets or whatever, and then all of a sudden Wisconsin's losing. Anyway, okay. All right, so what I did for the ACC, we're going to do it again today, to lead off our preview discussion, is ask you to nominate 2 fronts here. The first nomination is the most interesting coaching situation in the Big Ten for you this year as you go into the season. What is whether it's a guy on a hot seat or it's just you're really interested to see how a team's going to play, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's a roster that doesn't quite fit, but then someone's going to have to figure it out. What's the most interesting sort of coaching dynamic in the Big Ten for you this season?
Yeah, so there's a couple. I'm going to give a couple answers because that's just kind of how I am. Again, when I was prepping for this, something that I came across that I thought was interesting, and you definitely have a better grasp of the entirety of college basketball, so you could maybe say whether this is maybe normal or not.
I don't know if that's
right
true,
there.
but I appreciate the compliment.
There are 18 coaches in the Big Ten, right? There are 9 coaches with 6+ years at their school, and finished years at their school. And then there are 9 coaches with 2 or less. So there's no coach between like 3 and 5 years of experience at their specific school. And only one of them is 2, which is Mike Rhodes. He's done 2 years at Penn State. So 8 coaches with 1 or less years at their school. So that kind of leads me to Mike Rhodes as kind of his default answer, because, right, if we're looking at the spot where it's like, oh, kind of that 3 to 5 year gap, you're either kind of good for a while or you're getting fired. He's maybe on the hot seat, but also we'll talk about the roster. This almost feels like a roster that he's like, yeah, I'm going to have another year, because it's a lot of freshmen. It's a lot of players that haven't played any college basketball. Right. And so maybe he's like, we'll have another year to be able to develop. And that's kind of the timeline there. I think the other one, like taking out kind of hot seat type, the other one would be Danny Sprinkle, to me, just because of, right, he had a terrible first year at Washington. But you look back at what he's done, all signs point to him being a good coach. He has a roster this year that's probably way more Big Ten ready than anything he had last season. So like for me, I'm willing to just kind of throw away that first year. Be like, you know what? He had to really kind of wait on Great Osobor. Didn't know if he was coming or not. Had to spend a lot of NIL and just had to fit the roster kind of together late. Threw everything off. But this year is a roster he was able to really put together. Can he kind of have a bounce back year? And I'm not saying they have to be, a 6th seed in the tournament by any means, but like, can they be a bubble team? Can they make the tournament? Just kind of wanting to see that step in the right direction from Sprinkle. And because I do think he's a good coach, but just actually being able to now see some steps towards a positive result.
Yeah, especially because they did spend a lot of money on NIL last year and on high profile guys, and the a little bit like Kansas State, that hasn't worked out super well. And granted, it's 1 year in Sprinkle's case, but you still look at the talent on the roster this year and think, yeah, that's a team that should be in the top half-ish of the league, probably. And that bodes well because Washington, just as a program, predating the Big Ten move and their last, decade in the Pac-12, basically. The whole Mike Hopkins era, even predating that, it hasn't been a great run for Washington hoops, for a school that, if the program is good, there's a lot of support there and a lot of a chance to really get things going from a sort of vibes fan engagement standpoint. Okay, so we've discussed Washington in the interesting coaching situation spectrum. I think that's very fair. Who's the most interesting player in the Big Ten to you this season? I have some thoughts, but I'm interested to just I don't want to bias the question or the responses. So what do you think across the league? The guy that you look at and say, I can't wait to see how he plays for X team, or if he plays at his 90th, 95th percentile outcome, this team season will be different. Like who's the guy that you've zeroed in on?
Yeah, I mean, so this is, I mean, I could talk about this question for a minute. Um,
Please do. We got
but
plenty of time.
I think where I would start, and I don't know, it feels a little bit of a cop out answer, but it is my truthful thoughts. That would be Axel Lendenborg at Michigan. Um, just because, right, we'll talk about Michigan. Shooting is a concern, but I think what he's able to do as a two-way player, like he is what connects the entire roster to me, or and most of their lineups that they're going to run. With his ability to be, a secondary rim protector, and they're going to have good rim protectors out there at all times. With his ability to also potentially switch out onto the perimeter defensively and also offensively, I don't expect him to be the exact same role as Danny Wolf. I don't expect the pick and roll ball handling to be as high volume, but somebody that is capable of running pick and rolls or playing out in the perimeter, can work in the post, right? He has the upside of being just such a matchup nightmare. Obviously, it was well reported he was very close to going to the NBA draft and being probably a later first round pick. Um, he does take a step up in competition, right? Jumping up to the Big Ten, and do need everything to translate. But he's the most interesting to me just because, right, Michigan to me is a team with legitimate national title hopes. Um, and it really hinges on his ability to just be what he was at UAB, but now at Michigan.
Yeah, well, that's a great pick. I mean, I think the the way that this Michigan roster is constructed, there's a lot to be excited about, but you are a little worried that if if they go really big, with if Lindenberg's playing essentially on the perimeter, and you've got Mara and you're going really big on the inside, that the benefit you get in terms of rebounding, size, offensive rebounding, backline protection, all that good stuff is the trade off that you're asking Elliot Cadeau to do a ton with the ball in his hands all the time, because that's the best way you're going to generate movement and ball movement on the perimeter. And so yeah, I think Axel is the like linchpin in a lot of ways. And you're right, it's probably not going to be a Danny Wolf style season all the way, because that was just sort of a freaky one off. But the thing that's interesting is, and this is, like, we'll again touch on this a little bit more in the Michigan discussion as we go through the league. But you know, Florida Atlantic's teams look very different from the way Michigan looked last year, and Dusty May made it work anyway. You know what I mean? He is a very flexible tactician and coach in a way that I think most college basketball fans would be thrilled to have, because it's hard to be super dogmatic in this era of player acquisition. You know, no one executes their portal plan 100% perfectly. And you might end up with a team of guys, particularly if you're the kind of program that's bringing in a lot of faces in the offseason and sending a lot of guys out, and you're refreshing your roster. You might miss on a player or two in the portal that you really would really tie the room together, like the Rugg and Big Lebowski, and you don't get. You just have to kind of figure it out. And I think Dusty May is among the best in the country right now at doing that. So it bodes well. But you're right that Lindenberg has to be really, really good, I think, for them to justify sort of the national title level discussions that we're having about Michigan going into the season. Because I like Elliot Cadeau. I think he's an interesting and fun player, but he has his flaws, and they were in evidence a lot in the past 2 seasons, really, but especially last year. And so asking him to do all of your perimeter creation is asking a lot.
Yeah, and it definitely is. But that's where I think Lendenborg is so important. Do you want me to rattle off another name, or do you
Yeah,
got
please.
another
Yeah,
name?
go for it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think KJ Evans is one that really stands out to me at Oregon. Um, didn't quite have the role I think that he and many were hoping during his sophomore season last year, and he hasn't fully put it together. At least like hitting closer to his ceiling or his 90th percentile outcome. Uh, but he's a guy that, right, this Oregon roster has quietly grown a little bit deeper over the last month because they've added a few international guys, but still not a super deep roster, but a very talented roster, a team that should be up towards the top of the Big Ten. And KJ Evans to me is the ultimate X factor, I think, kind of on that team where you know what you're getting with Shellstead and Biddle, right? They're awesome. Maybe Shellstead takes a little bit of a jump. But KJ Evans is the one where, right, he could be that kind of two-way player where that, I mean, him and Biddle is an elite interior defense. He can be, probably the third or fourth option offensively. I have thought about this stat, I think, at least once a week since the season ended. With Shellstad, Biddle, and KJ on the floor last year, which 263 minutes, not the largest sample size, but not like, not one of those sample sizes that's just like a 50-minute sample size.
Right.
Plus 37.9 net rating with those three on the floor last year for Oregon. That would have been the best in the country. 89.2 defensive rating would have been the best in the country. And 127.1 offensive rating would have been right at the top. They were really good with those three last year. The minutes didn't always come because I don't think the consistency was there for KJ and kind of the individual, kind of how he's able to work through the game. I also know Oregon loved Brandon Angel a lot, and I did too. But he's somebody that, out of like, if we were to list like the X factor for all 18 teams, I could probably argue he might be like the one that could raise the ceiling the most for any team, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I was just pulling up those lineup splits that you're talking about on CBB Analytics, and yeah, that's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100th percentile net rating with those three guys on the floor together.
So it's like, I don't know why they didn't play more.
Yeah,
last year.
I'd be interested to ask. I mean, is there a foul trouble situation there that just kept them off the floor at the same time, or is Altman just didn't think the fit made? I mean, 263 minutes is not nothing, but
yeah,
in the course of a season, for example, Shellstad and Biddle played 587 minutes without Evans on the floor, which is considerably more, right? So That's interesting. Okay. Definitely one to watch, and maybe if you're an Oregon beat reporter, ask Dana Altman at Media Day, are these three guys going to play together a lot? Because if they do, that seems like it bodes really well. Okay, all right, let's get into the tiers. I would encourage all listeners to not take my tiers predictively seriously. Just kind of trying to randomly group, not randomly, but broadly group teams into sections that I think make some sense. Just to give us a little flavor instead of just, okay, now let's talk about Michigan. Okay, now let's talk about Purdue. But, there are some themes you can pull out and some teams that are kind of in similar situations that we'll get into as we go down the list. But let's start with, I think, the team that, and this is, by the way, the national title contenders. You know what? I'll do what I did in the ACC pod really quickly. We're going to go down the list. I'm just going to rattle off who I've got where. Just to set the table here, and then we'll go through each team. So, national title contenders, I've got Purdue, Michigan, Illinois. I'm very high on Illinois, and we can talk about that in a minute. The talk me through the case tier, which is I expect you to help me be educated about what I should think about these teams. UCLA, Ohio State, Michigan State. Steady, I've got. This is the steady tier. I've got Wisconsin, Oregon. Maybe I could put Michigan State in that tier now that I'm thinking about it. But, okay. Chad Baker Mazzara forever tier. That's USC. One team tier. Just highlight Chad Baker Mazzara, one of my favorite sort of college basketball players. New coaches, new rosters, fascinating transitions tier. That's Iowa, Indiana, Maryland. Pretty self-explanatory there. It does what it says on the tin. I'm intrigued tier. Nebraska, Washington, Northwestern. The tier under that is called obvious good hire, but maybe a year away, Minnesota. Below that is the return to defense ? Tier, and that's Rutgers. Rutgers maybe going to try to go back to like doing what Steve Pikiell's always done before he had 2 top 5 picks on the team. I guess they both didn't get drafted in the top 5, but that maybe had more to do with one of the players' representation than anything else. Representation that has been as no longer being retained. And then the last tier is you don't know what you've got until it's gone. That's Penn State. Really just a lament for Ace Bailey and Niedermeyer. So anyway, okay. Let's start with Purdue. Very good basketball team, very good basketball program. Okay, let's go to Michigan. No, I'm just kidding. Let's talk about Purdue and how their roster is going to shake out. I mean, obviously Braden Smith is great. Fletcher Loyer is good. Trey Kaufman-Renn good. They are a little bit different than they were in the Edey years in terms of where they're generating their offense and where they're starting it. Obviously, they're just not dumping the ball down in the post to an absolute demon who can't be stopped for multiple years in a row. But they do have some interesting wrinkles with the guys around those 3 this year that make them maybe a little bit different than they were a year ago. How are you feeling about Purdue?
Yeah, I mean, as somebody I said off the top, I went to Purdue, and actually my first year at Purdue was the Carson Edwards Elite Eight run, which was fun and also incredible pain right after one after another.
Still the best game I've ever watched live was the Virginia Purdue game where Edwards had 40.
41,
and
I think.
Virginia just kept answering, and obviously the way the game ended, but like before all of that happened, but before the crazy ending and the overtime or whatever, that Edwards performance in that game was just unbelievable.
Yeah. No, it really was. And so getting to this year's team, right, it starts with Braden, potential National Player of the Year, like reigning Big Ten Player of the Year. If things break right, he has a chance to break the NCAA all-time assist record. That would involve Purdue going on a fairly deep run in March and also him maintaining his average. This is a team that, like, I think their floor is high just because of how good the offense is going to be. The defense is going to be the question, and maybe we'll get into that more in a second. But this offense is going to be so much fun. Like, right, I think it's being overlooked almost how good this offense can really be this season. And this is me being very high on it, but like Braden Smith to me is the best passer in the country. TKR is the top 2 short roller, top 3 short roller in the country. I mean, probably has a case for number 1. Those 2 form arguably the best 2-man game in the entire country to me. You surround him with spacing everywhere, and then they go out and they get rebounding with Oscar Clough. They get Daniel Jacobson healthy and who's also able to put on more weight and muscle during kind of his year because he had the season-ending injury early on in the season. So they've added some pieces to kind of shore up those holes. You bring back a ton of retention from last season. You add in a guy like Omer Meyer, who's kind of this wild card overseas combo guard that if things go right, like if he hits his 100 percentile outcome, he's a one and done. I don't expect that to happen. But realistically, he's a guy that can contribute right away. You're getting some sophomore year bumps from some of your other guys. Like there's just, you go up and down the roster and it's just like, yeah, this roster should be better pretty much in every single aspect compared to last year. And it's not like they were bad last year by any means.
No, and the things that they were bad at last year, I mean, primarily was like interior defending, I guess.
Yes.
And Jacobson, in theory, helps with that. Clough should help with that. They should be better as a sort of just, it's a little bit more annoying to come into the middle of the paint against Purdue than it was a year ago. Whether or not they're going to be, some devastating at the rim shot blocking force, I don't think that's going to be the case, probably. But just the ability to wall up and keep guys, on angles away from the rim when they're, last year against Purdue, were getting downhill at the rim pretty regularly, yes. Right? I'm sure you saw plenty of less contested than they should be layups against Purdue's interior last season as you were watching. So yeah, I mean, I'm just the nitty gritty of the roster and the specific pieces on the margins and how it fills out. Like Omer Meyer, like CJ Cox, how Clough, does he give them a little bit more post stuff? Does it work super well with Kaufman Wren? I think probably it's going to be fine in terms of spacing and all that. But it's just like whatever the little marginal things that you might point out that are, this could be a hindrance or whatever. Like Matt Painter has a long and vaunted track record of figuring that stuff out. And even with teams that have clear flaws, he figures, something like a solution out much more often than not. And so you take their core of what they have returning, and like you mentioned, Smith and TKR, that combo is devastating. Smith as a as a passer and a mover of the ball, great. Also, his addition last year of like pull up elbow jumpers that you can't guard because he's kind of fading away and getting good elevation on it. Like he's added a ton to his scoring game as well. And just, you take that as a baseline, you figure Matt Painter's going to kind of maximize it. And you've got a national title contender on your hands.
Yeah, and 100%. And I honestly, one of the things that's made me happiest kind of this off season is just some of the things that have come out of practices and different interviews with Painter, and that is like, and the players, they are buying into like offense being their identity. That doesn't mean that the defense is not, like, the defense needs to be better, and they also know that, but like there's no reason why this shouldn't end up being the number one KenPom offense in the country. And the case for that to me is like they were number 7 last year. I love Caleb First. They were playing 4-on-5 offensively. They were with Caleb First out there.
I deal with that, by the way, because he was a really talented prospect coming in, and it just never really quite happened for him, even though you could see the skill set in flashes.
Yeah, and he performed his role well, which was defense, more of like just kind of this lanky big that could kind of switch out on the perimeter. But right, it was teams ignored him offensively, and also generally the fourth option on the floor was one of 2 freshman guards in CJ Cox, Jakari Harris, some like Miles Colvin in there, right? The CJ Cox, Jakari Harris as well, like, you're going to get those guys being sophomores, taking jumps. Jakari Harris really started playing well to end the season. We know CJ like has those moments of just like the Alabama game where he just literally took over for 2 minutes. You go through whatever you kind of think the roster is, whether it's, or the closing lineup will be, right? We know it's going to be Braden Fletch, TKR. It's going to be one of Meyer, CJ, Jakari, and then all the big spot, Clough or Jacobson. Like, one of those guys is going to be the 5th option offensively, right? There is nowhere with this team you can send help off of and be comfortable doing it. I'm not too worried about the spacing with TKR in the big, just because of how TKR can kind of stretch the defense in that mid-range area. Braden's so good at hitting him on the pocket pass and the short roll, 10 to 15 feet out. TKR has incredible touch on his floater. Like, he was one of the most efficient players in the country last season with his floater. So yeah, offensively, like there's a scenario to me where it's not just, oh, will they be the number one KenPom offense? It's by how much. Now the flip side, defensively, they don't have to be awesome. They just have to be good. Top 25, top 30. They're going to be able to get back to their identity, which is deep drop coverage, force mid-range shots, control the glass. Right, Clough is going to be able to bring that. Jacobson is more of a pure shot blocker to me than Clough. And so he can maybe impact the game a little bit more that way when he's in the game. But you go from last year, TKR was kind of your rim, quote unquote, rim protector. You go from that to 2, at worst, serviceable rim protectors, I would say, between Clough and Jacobson. Obviously, the ceiling is much higher for those 2. I think it allows the defense to, like, more than just simply, hey, there's actually rim protection. It also kind of, I think, allows the guards to do what they want to do, which is, right, Lawyer, he's very, very good offensively. He gets picked on defensively. Last year, if he was funneling to a guy, it was to TKR or Cam Heide, or if First was down low. Now that's right. That's going to be a true big. So there's things like that too, that they're not going to be elite defensively, but I think they can be good enough. And with how good the offense can be, right, that's kind of where the national championship ceiling comes from. I will say last thing before I'll throw it back to you. I said first, right? I love first. He was very important for them defensively, very important.
Right.
And I do think, right, Clough and Jacobson provide the true rim protection. First was the one that guarded the stretch fours and the guys that were more mobile, like the Ace Baileys, the Nick Martinellis, like those types of players. One, because he was just better at it than TKR defensively. Two, helped kind of keep TKR out of some foul trouble. That's not going to be the case assuming TKR is at the four. Right? You're not putting Clough or Jacobson on those types of guys. So Purdue does have to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, Purdue last year, I just pulled it up to double check my instincts, or at least my memory was correct from last year. They ranked 332nd in the country in 2-point field goal percentage allowed, 358th in block rate on the defensive end. There's more to playing good interior defense than blocking shots. Obviously, there's a ton more, right? I was talking about this in my Big East preview of UConn, where you look at Terrace Reed's block rate for UConn last year, and it's like, wow, this guy must be a really awesome interior defender. And Dan Hurley is like, no, he's not. Like, or he wasn't. We're getting him there. You know what I mean? Like, in a positive way, he's like, we're getting him there this offseason. It's way more about where you are, where you stand, the spots you get to in different situations and different looks. Like, it's not just about flying over the top and blocking someone when they eventually do get to the rim. We don't want them to be at the rim in the first place. So yeah, there's more to Purdue's interior defensive woes than just like they didn't block enough shots or they didn't challenge enough shots at the rim. They didn't do that, and they also let people just get into the middle of the defense much too easily. So that's the number one thing that has to change. You're right that it's an interesting matchup thing without first. He was very useful in that regard as a defender. In kind of an inverse of I think maybe what I expected of him when he came in the program. You saw some of his skills. And you're like, on the offensive end, this guy's going to be a matchup nightmare. He ended up just being like a really good matchup plug and play guy on the defensive end and didn't maybe ever quite get there offensively. But look, it's Purdue. It's Matt Painter. They're going to be really good. The questions that we're asking, as you've heard, are to what extent? And again, if you're the number one offense in Ken Palm, and I think that case is extremely valid, and you are just pretty good defensively, just okay, 35th, 40th even, you still have a chance to make a deep turn and run. And you look at some of the teams that have done that in the past decade or whatever. There have been really, really good defensive teams like Florida last year, teams like Virginia 2019. You win the national title because you're top 5 on both sides of the ball. You're just really good at everything. But there are plenty of teams that are a little bit more specious on the defensive end, but they're just so good offensively that they make it work and they beat people and score the buckets they need to score in the postseason. Purdue could be one of those teams. Okay, next team. We talked about them a little bit already with Michigan. Besides the Yaxel piecing things to, sort of pulling everything together on the offensive end, what are the big things you're looking at with this Michigan roster? Again, if we're talking about, as I have them here, like ostensibly second in the league, potential national title contender, great coach, really flexible tactically and able to get a lot out of his players. What are the big sort of question marks with Michigan where you could maybe make the case they should be lower here, or just what's your vibe with them?
Yeah, no, I think they're pretty clear second to me. And truthfully told, I was lower on them before I kind of went into the newcomer film, and then once I watched, I came away. I was like, okay, no, I can see the vision, and maybe compared to like a Purdue, right? I think Purdue and Michigan ceiling's basically the same. Where I think they're both legitimate national title contenders. I would say Michigan's floor is probably a little bit lower, just because things could get wonky if they don't go correctly. The shooting is going to be the big thing, right? You look at their projected starting lineup. Namari Burnett shot the ball well last year. Yaxel's knocked him down in lower volume. Trey McKenney is more of a mid-range guy, the incoming freshman. But there isn't a ton of proven shooting. I guess Will Shetter, even though he's more of a reserve type role, Ellie Cadeau can knock one down. Right, but it's not like you look at the roster and you're like, oh wow, spacing's everywhere, and shooting is everywhere.
Right.
What honestly, like I think the style that they do it in will be a little bit different, right? I'm not saying that they're going to copy their in-state rival Michigan State, exactly, but I think a lot of the formula to what Michigan State did last year is what Michigan will try to do this year, and that is simply dominate the glass, dominate the paint, and basically just be like, yeah, we don't really care if we don't have enough shooting because we're just gonna go rebound every miss that we have anyways. So like, who cares? Like, good luck
Yeah.
stopping us. Elite defensively, right? To me, the defense is the calling card with what this defense could be. Lendeborg's awesome. Like the Lendeborg Mara front court. I am hoping it works because I think it will. They are. I mean, they're two guys that I think will have cases for making the Big Ten defense team, right? And that's your front court in a Big Ten. You have some solid perimeter defenders in Gale and Burnett. I think Cadeau can be fine too. The defense it should be really, really good. You compare that with dominating the glass. I think that there's enough there that the offense kind of inverse to Purdue, right? Where offense was really good for Purdue. The defense needs to be good enough. I think the defense is going to be so good for Michigan. The offense just has to be good. Doesn't have to be great. Doesn't have to be awesome. Just needs to be good. And right, I think Michigan State last year was like 20 offense and 25 offense, 4 defense for Ken Palm. Somewhere in there makes sense to me for this Michigan team.
Right. Yeah, and you if the spacing is not ideal, you can overcome it with individual talent. You know what I mean? Which is essentially what Michigan State did last year with Jace Richardson primarily. I mean, look, Jace Richardson, to my eye anyway, and maybe we could go back and look like at his shot quality stats or whatever. To my eye, he took a lot of tough ones last year, and a lot of them went down. There are a lot of 17-foot sort of step backs on the baseline that he just buried because he's a really talented kid. And maybe that's a little bit of what Michigan is going to need to have. I am fascinated to see how the Cadeau thing plays out. It's obviously a player. I feel like everyone, but I feel like I watched pretty closely at North Carolina because when I first saw him as a freshman, he felt like, oh, this guy's like Kendall Marshall. Like this is like get up and down the floor. He's going to whip it ahead. Great assist, great eye for sort of that intuitive thing that some really good passers have, where the ball's just on time, great angle, right in the pocket where it needs to be basically every time. And I do think he has that, but his inability to combine that with a low turnover rate. I mean, his turnover rate last year was like 25, 26%.
Yeah.
He still had a great assist rate, really, almost in the 40s in terms of assist rate, which is really good, but it's sort of a risk reward proposition. And he still hasn't developed anything like a volume, reliable perimeter jumper to where teams can get punished for going under on screens. And I think that could introduce an additional, if Elliot Cadeau was, I mean, I'm trying to think of another good example here, but like if Elliot Cadeau was RJ Davis, which he's very different players in many ways, but like a guy who can play on the perimeter with the ball in his hands, can move it fine, but fundamentally is going to punish you if you don't really pull out defensively every time he has the ball in his hands. Then this Michigan thing to me goes to like another level, conceptually anyway. And I think maybe that development is there for him. We just have to see. I don't think he's ever going to become like a lights out, I shoot 200 threes in a season and make 90 of them type of guy. But getting him in the right spots to initiate offense, maybe getting him up and down the floor a little bit more. I'm not sure. It's just, I have no doubt Dusty May will figure it out. He figured out a team with 2 7-footers, one of whom was suddenly a ball handler last year. But it is an interesting new look for the team itself and for what Cadeau is maybe capable of.
Yeah, and it's a lot will ride on his ability to kind of get downhill. And I think that's what they're going to ask for him is just get downhill. Now, one could argue, well, we just talked about there's maybe not going to be spacing in that, but
Yeah.
I do think he's good enough at getting 2 feet in the paint. And if he's able to bend defenses just a little bit, that's where, Yaxel is able to just should be able to absolutely eat. And then obviously you have Mara and Morez, who will be 2 of the best offensive rebounders, 2 of the best rim finishers in the conference. You can kind of dump the ball down to. You also have like Trey McKinney. I don't know what he's looked like at practice or anything like that, but he was a very highly ranked incoming freshman. He's a guy that could potentially start. I don't know if he would be a day one starter, but like he's also somebody that has that ability to go create from the perimeter. If Michigan, if the Cadeau thing doesn't perfectly work out, he's probably their kind of backup option of being that guy that can just go get something.
Right. Well, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they make it work. Mara is a great pickup, and you're right. Like we'll give them alongside some of these other guys, we'll give them a baseline of rebounding, interior defense, offensive rebounding, putbacks, buckets around the rim. That I think it requires spacing to do it, but I think you go back and look at like those really good Gonzaga teams with Drew Timme and Chet Holmgren, and they had guys who could space the floor and shoot the ball, but they just had a ton of layups all the time. Like it was a layup factory in those Gonzaga teams, and you kind of think of offense like high flying offenses as being very perimeter oriented. The Alabamas of the world, very spacing, and we're just going to put up a ton of threes, get good looks. It's all threes and rim rate. But there are many different ways to build an offense, and if you're just getting layups every second time down the floor, you're going to be really effective, even if it doesn't look as aesthetically pretty to someone who wants to see a bunch of threes all the time.
Yeah, definitely, and that's what they have to do. They have to be a team that lives in the paint. To me, if shooting pops up, awesome, and they'll have Burnett and Shutter. It's not like they can be completely ignored, right? They are good shooters,
Yeah.
but yeah, they need to live in the paint, and then like Dusty May is a good coach. Like I know Three Men Weave put out their Big Ten coach rankings, and I forget where Dusty might have been 2 or 3, or he was up there.
Yeah.
And I fully believe that. Like he is somebody that is he's going to figure out this roster. And when you think back to last year, right? We think of the offense and the pick and rolls and Danny Wolf. The offense was fine. It was 43rd in offense. The defense was 12th, and I would argue they have much better defenders pretty much everywhere on the floor this year, outside of maybe point guard. So it's going to be a fun roster. I'm very excited to see how Dusty May kind of puts it all together, especially with they switch a lot off ball, keep everything in front, play deep drop coverage. Like it just this roster feels like it fits that identity.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fascinating to see, and I would agree with the 3-man weave guys on May's aptitude. Like he's already right up there. It was a great hire by Michigan to get him, and the timing worked out well for when he was one of those guys after the Final Four, but even the season that followed it and getting them back in the tournament the next year, it was like, okay, take your pick, man. He's one of those guys who's like, whatever job you want, if it lines up with your timing, you can have it. And he, for Michigan to get him in that context is a pretty big deal. So, very interesting season at Michigan ahead. Okay, the next team I had in my title contenders, maybe squeeze them in here, maybe not. Some, reasonable minds can differ on this, but I've got Illinois. I'm very high on Illinois. Obviously Tomislav Ivisic is the load-bearing piece here and a fabulous player. His passing for his size is remarkable, and I think makes what Brad Underwood wants to do with guys sort of buzzing around him and cutting and moving and spacing. It kind of makes the whole thing go. But I'm high on Boswell as a sort of not breakout, but just like I think he's going to improve again. Very high on Stojakovic, who was already good on some pretty bad teams in the Bay Area. And last week's pod, I forgot that he played for Cal for a year. I was just like, oh yeah, and he transferred from Stanford. We were talking about Stanford. I was like, oh, they lost Stojakovic, and then I went back and checked. I was like, oh wait, he actually played for Cal too, and was also pretty good for Cal. Playing on a team with good big passers that should move in space well with good guard play, like he could be a very good player. I'm not sure if you've done the newcomer piece yet. What did you see from Stojakovic coming in? Because I have a feeling like, given his pedigree, and it's not just because his dad played in the NBA, but that doesn't hurt. I feel like you see guys like this sort of gradually, like, oh yeah, nice player. Oh yeah, that's Peja Stojakovic's kid. And then like by the time they're sophomore, junior in college, you're like, this guy's really good.
Yeah, I mean Stojakovic. Looking through, yeah, I have him. It's not an exact science, and this could change as I go, but roughly a top 30 player in the Big Ten, and I do have him third, like third best on Illinois' roster, and that might be underselling him a bit, honestly, because the offense can be so good. I do have him as the second best offensive player for what it's worth. You look at what Illinois has been able to kind of do with wings over the past handful of years, right? Will Riley last year, Terrence Shannon, and right, Ayu DeSumo a few years before. Not It's not a one-to-one comparison. Different styles, and Brad Underwood has showed he's been willing to adjust to different styles depending on who he has. But Stojakovic is kind of the next one up in line to me of that, of just kind of a bucket getter that can go get what you need from the wing, can handle the ball, can run pick and rolls if you need him to, can operate off ball and right where if he's getting kickouts, now he can attack closeouts. Loves getting kind of in that mid-range area. Like he fits a lot with his driving ability to me of what Illinois really looks for in their wings. Has similar, to, I think Will Riley has some of just that you know tough shot making ability that you can't really teach. You watch a player and you're just like, yeah, he just I don't quite know how it always goes in, but it does. And having a guy like that in this system where there's a lot of freedom, he will have the green light, I'm sure, to take kind of whatever he wants. It should be a pretty good fit. I think maybe the one concern is like Illinois has gone away from they really tried limiting kind of their mid-range looks and taking a lot more jumpers from three. He has I'm trying to find the stats really quick. He's been like a fine 3-point shooter, if I'm remembering correctly, in college, but not like an elite by any means. 31% last year,
Yeah.
33% the year before. So there's maybe a little bit of a question there, but wings in this Illinois system, I'm going to be bought in on.
Yeah, and yeah, he was a little almost 32% last year on 129 attempts, which is fine. He was a little bit better the previous year on 104 attempts. What's interesting to me is that as a freshman, and granted he played in slightly fewer minutes or whatever, but he attempted just 36 free throws as a freshman at Stanford. Last year was 165. And related to the shooting discussion, he also shot 82% from the free throw line last year, which developmentally, if you talk to NBA scouts or even college coaches, they look for guys who are kind of like just on a broad statistical level when they're filtering for transfer players or they're scouting someone for potential in the NBA. Will look at your free throw shooting as an indicator of like, okay, this guy can shoot the ball. Like mechanically, physically, he can do it. We just need to make it a live game situation thing where he is, repeating mechanics when guarded, coming off a screen, whatever the case may be, right? Um, and so there's potential there for Stojakovic to develop as a perimeter shooter too. But even if he doesn't, even if he say he's 33% from three again next year, um, Underwood will be happy to have that with the volume that he wants his players to play out there anyway. And he gets, Stojakovic gets past defenders and gets downhill as well from the wing, which is a huge plus, and something Will Riley did well also. So, yeah, he's an interesting piece. Obviously, we talked about Tomislav Visic. His brother, Big Z, is also on the team. Slightly different player. Tomislav is probably the more fun one. And I think Illinois is going to be a story all year because of the Eastern European influx of players. And it's a story in terms of like getting getting guys who would probably previously have not considered college basketball to come over and play because of NIL and whatever. But I also think it's going to end up being a story because they're going to be really fun to watch. And they're going to play in a way where even if it was a bunch of dudes from, uh, the suburbs of Chicago or wherever, like from the region, they're going to play in such a way that you're like, you're going to see the European influence on the game, even though it wouldn't even need to be European players doing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, because that's kind of the way Underwood's teams have started to develop anyway, is lots of cutting and moving and screening and space and perimeter play and savvy guys and big guys who can pass and all of the sort of classical Euroball stuff has become much more a part of college basketball, much more a part of what Underwood is doing. And so if these guys were all called like, Steve Michelson and they were from Lawrence North or whatever, it would be a slightly different deal. But I think it's going to be like not every time, but most of the time when you're going to have like a sideline reporter doing a piece on Illinois during a Big Ten game, it's probably going to come up and it's going to be a thing. And I think their style of play is going to like reinforce that sort of stereotype is maybe not the right word, but that impression that people are going to have of them, right?
Yeah, I mean, this will be. I'm excited to see what this team looks like altogether. Um, Besides the heavy 3-point offense, kind of as of late, especially last year, and I think at times to the chagrin of maybe Illinois fans because it wasn't falling a lot. But this is a team that is going to they just have some talent everywhere. Like I think Avicic is one of the best players in the conference. Very easily could be an all Big Ten first team guy to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just with his and I think he can be used a little bit more this year as a pure connector and like handoff hub. Whereas last year with Cage, with Jonas, with Will Riley, with Boswell, it was going to be way more pick and roll, pick and roll, pick and roll, and there's going to be a lot of that this season as well. But there were flashes last year where you saw them use him as kind of this top of the key, like, all right, cut off of me and I'm going to find you type of guy. So I'm interested to see if they go to that even a little bit more with Tommy Slav. But yeah, this is a team that, aside from that, should be pretty heavy pick and roll again. They have Boswell, they have Stojakovic, the Petrovic coming over from overseas, who's he'll be 23 before March even starts. All three of those guys are guys that pick and roll can get downhill. Boswell and Stojakovic especially, I think, should really put pressure on interior defenses. Both drew fouls at a really good rate last season. Could probably get some bigs into foul trouble. I think so going back to you have them in like the national title contender bucket. I don't think I can fully get there, assuming like I think it's a little bit semantics. It probably depends on what you count as a national title contender. To me, national title contender is like a top 5-ish team, top 6 team. That's like basically you should be a favorite to go to the Final Four. I think Illinois' ceiling is very much winning a national title. To me, there's probably a little bit of a gap between like them and Michigan and Purdue, just because I think there's a little bit more questions of the defense. I like both of Visic's to kind of anchor what they want to do defensively. Play super deep drop coverage, force a ton of mid-range shots, dominate the glass. Like that's what they're going to do. They're very, very conservative defensively, and it's worked for them. Boswell, awesome perimeter defender. We know that. Outside of those three guys, like I think Mirkovic could be solid defensively. But the questions are there, I think, quickly of like, what does the defense look like? And the offense, right, I should be very good. I don't know if it's quite at the level of like elite. So there's just a couple more questions for me to fully put them in that category with Purdue and Michigan, but they're not too far behind to me.
Have you watched Mihailo Petrovic at all?
Yeah.
What do you make of him? Because he's kind of a mystery box player to me in that I don't have any kind of feel for what, averaging 14 points for KK Mega means in the Big Ten, particularly for a guy who's ostensibly like a 23-year-old freshman.
Yeah. No, so he's very much a pass first point guard going to run pick and rolls. He has really, really good feel out of pick and rolls for passing. I think teams can play him more as that and kind of dare him to beat them with kind of his scoring. He can shoot. He isn't an elite shooter by my eye. He's definitely more of a creator, get downhill, collapse defenses, kick out type guy, which I think fits really well with Illinois because they want to jack up threes. They want to have spacing. So, right, he's the one that can get into the paint, collapse, and kick. But there's going to be concerns too, right? Of like, how does it translate right away? I don't think the defense was all that good from what I've saw from the overseas film. Can teams kind of pick on him? It's going to come down to, is his facilitating so good that like he's just going to have to play, which is very much in the cards. It's just if it's not A plus facilitating, can some of the other stuff translate right away? And so I think yeah, bag of mystery type player is feels pretty right. Of like there's a scenario he's averaging 7 assists a game, something like that. There's also a scenario where maybe he doesn't even start if things go poorly. So
Right.
that's kind of where I have him at.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. Again, he's 23. He played really well in the Adriatic League last year, which, if you talk to people who watch European basketball or scout NBA prospects, like it's a well respected basketball league. It's not like the Icelandic League or something. With all due respect to the Icelandic basketball league, it's a pretty high level of basketball. So a very interesting player to bring over, and again, the kind of guy who probably would have explored further professional options, but the opportunity to make a little money in the United States is appealing to more and more players of his ilk. So yeah, going to be a fascinating season at Illinois. Maybe I'm a little high on them. That's okay. We'll see how it goes. All right, next tier, which is basically talk me through the case. Like I think there are probably plenty of people who will have UCLA ranked higher than Illinois to come into the season. I'm not quite there, but it is probably just a lack of understanding. Fortunately, we have you here, so you can tell me why UCLA is going to be good or really good or not as good as people think. What do you think?
Yeah, so right, we're the way that the Big Ten set up this season. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of tight grouping. I'm going to quickly plug myself too. I have this is I don't know when this is coming out, but I have a Big Ten preview coming out that is very, very, very detailed. That is coming out, should be out. You can check my Twitter at JoeJacksonCDB for it. But as I was going through writing all the team previews, writing all the player breakdowns, I kind of guessed, I would like estimated where I kind of projected these teams to be in terms of KenPom rankings at the end of the year. And it's more of a rough estimation rather than I think they're number 10 because these 9 teams are better, if that makes sense. So I had UCLA 10th and Illinois 14th. So they're right there. What gives UCLA the slight edge over like an Illinois is I think I buy the offense a little bit more for sure. And again, we're splitting hairs between the two. They're in the same exact tier to me. But right, UCLA last season, 37th offense, 14th defense. You retain the players you probably should have retained in Sky Clark, Eric Daly, and Tyler Bilodeau, and you go out and get a top, I don't know, 5, 10 point guard very conservatively in Donovan Dent. Bilodeau was awesome. Daly was awesome. Sky Clark was good in his role. He kind of found his role and found his home.
Hey, Sky Clark, shaky start to the career, had a nice year last year. It's honestly pretty good to see because the guy played at Illinois. All right, well,
Yep.
that wasn't the worst part, but he also had to play for Kenny Payne for a year.
Yeah.
Got hurt. Like a talented prospect who hadn't really ever put it together, and then last year was solid, like a solid, useful, high major college basketball player. It was good to see.
Yeah, exactly. And they got him into a role where he's way less usage and could be more of a like 3-and-D combo guard, I guess is the wordy title I would give him. Of right, he can run the offense when needed and help move the ball, but more of just kind of a defensive player. Shot the ball really well from 3. That also needs to just sustain, which would be big. But UCLA, like I really like what they can do offensively. Bilodeau is awesome in that mid-range area. He fits. He going into last season, he was one of the best fits I thought in the entire Big Ten, like for the transfers, just with his ability to operate in that mid-range area, the high post. He's probably going to play more of the 4 this year, and that's going to be a question mark with the bigs of Booker and Jamerson is not your best big room. But basically, my thought here is right. They were 20th in KenPom last season. At worst, they can basically go back to last year's formula, but now you have Donovan Dent instead. And to me, that's a big jump up from with Sebastian Mack and Dylan Andrews, who were fine, but right, Dent I think really gives them that next level, and they already have a good base because of kind of the core they bring back. all signs point to Jamar Brown being really good this offseason. Obviously, that has to translate to in-game for it to actually matter. I'm still big on Trent Berry. I think he could have like a breakout year as kind of a role player. The big question is their big room, right? Like Xavier Booker and Steven Jamerson isn't the most exciting 5-man room, I guess I'll say.
Unless you're still a Xavier Booker believer. Unless you're a Xavier Booker truther.
Like, I think, I don't know. He can be good. I think he can be good defensively for what they want to do too. I think he fits in more defensively with athletic, can high hedge, can help protect the rim. They don't really have a guy. They don't have a guy that's they play they play the Maras and the Oscar Cluffs and those types of bigs. Like they don't have a guy that can just be physical with them, and that's I think the big concern. But if Booker can, if this is the year the shot finally comes around for him, we know the defense can be good. It can work. It is a big question to me.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I think that makes sense. Like baseline, stable baseline, but putting sprinkling Donovan Dent over the top of it is a thing you can do to elevate your team pretty quickly. And they'll unless something goes horribly wrong and Mick Cronin wants to have one of his trademark the sky is falling press conferences in November because he just realizes they can't defend or whatever. They should be fine.
Possible.
It's always possible, but yeah. Okay, so next team's Ohio State, and I just wrote the Big East preview, so it's on my mind. But there are some parallels with Kim English here, where I asked a bunch of Providence fans actually in the Discord last week. I didn't want to attribute to an entire fan base things that I saw on Twitter in February of last spring or last early winter, late winter, whatever. Just because I had these vague memories of Providence fans freaking out and me just sort of seeing it algorithmically. So I asked them what's the vibe on Kim? Where are you guys at with him? And it was a lot of we like Kim. He seems like a good guy. We want him to win, but this is the year he needs to do so because we think the talent is good. He's changed his staff, and there's kind of not a whole lot of excuses if it doesn't come together this year. I feel like this is kind of where Ohio State is. If that makes sense to you, they have a coach that they like, but who's been fine, but has not had this sort of high level success that I think Ohio State fans would ideally like to have. It's maybe not as high a priority as the football side of things, but they would still like to be good at basketball too. And so this is kind of the year where you look at this roster and the talent remains. And it's just kind of can the coach push, maximize it to the point where they, where fans feel like you're getting the most out of the guys on the floor.
Yeah, this I don't know if he's on the hot seat or anything like that. We'll see
whether or not he's a candidate to lose his job at the end of the year. It's still that we kind of want to be convinced that this is the right situation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, if he's going into year 2, well, I'm not going to count the last handful of games. He's going to year 2 of having Bruce Thornton, and Bruce Thornton has never made the postseason, the NCAA tournament. It's going into a senior year. If that happens again and Bruce Thornton plays all 4 years at Ohio State and never makes the tournament, there's going to be a lot of questions then surrounding, Diebler and just kind of everything going on. I will say, so I'm lower. I'm much lower probably on Ohio State than consensus and where I think you kind of have them in the rankings.
Yeah.
I was incredibly low on them going into last season. I really did not like the front court that Diebler put together, and with Stewart and Bradshaw. But I think I'm low on them again this year. But I will say I see the pathway for them being good more than I did last year, if that makes sense. I think this team, I see it more. I just don't fully believe it, mainly because of the defense. I have not many questions I have maybe one question about the offense, which we can get into. I am concerned that this defense is going to be bad, bottom 3 Big Ten defense type. going through the roster, like Tilly's solid defensively. I don't know if he's like an awesome anchor, but he can be serviceable in that area. Thornton, quality perimeter defender. I wouldn't say he's a lockdown by any means, but quality. Like I think obviously everybody would want to have Bruce Thornton on their team, but if you're looking at just the defense, teams are going to be cool with having that. And then it's a lot of question marks after that to me of like, how are they going to defend? It seems like Devin Royal's going to play more three this year, which offensively, he could have another gigantic year because of that. Defensively, he has to now hold up on the perimeter even more. So I also just want to see, even right, depending on whatever their level of success is, and I'm hoping that I'm wrong about the defense and that this is a team that can make the tournament because Bruce Thornton deserves to be in the tournament. I am hoping to see a little bit more just kind of like ball movement and stuff within their offense. I thought last year was at times very stagnant. And I understand you have Bruce Thornton, you have John Mobley and Devin Royal. Like those are guys that kind of just go creates, and you do want to let them do that. But it just, with like a guy like Tilly that can move the ball, Noel is a skilled offensive player. Like I think there's improvements to be made for the offensive system itself and getting more ball movement and getting more, moving the ball back and forth along the perimeter. They were, 17th in the Big Ten last season in assist rates. There was a lot of possessions that was dribble, shoots. So that'll,
They're a little
like,
bit hard to
regardless
watch,
of even
honestly, at times. They were a little bit of a tough watch, like because it was just like you said, it was a lot of run some stuff. Okay, get the ball back out top. Thornton's got it. Run a ball screen for him and see how it goes. There wasn't a whole lot of second order stuff happening.
Exactly. Which again, Bruce giving the ball to Bruce Thornton and saying, "Hey, go create." Not a bad
strategy.
offensive idea, but
Yeah.
just wanting to there. If Diebler's going to be the guy, right? Just wanting to kind of see more from him as kind of an X's and O's type guy moving forward. And I guess, like I said, I will give him credit. I think that this roster he put together, like it just purely off season on paper, I think it fits way more than the year before. So I think he's learning and improving. Got to just see it now, though.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's tough, I mean, like it's tough for guys who get, he got his job in sort of an interim situation. They finished the season extremely well, got buy-in from the university, the administration, and the athletics program, and all that good stuff. But no matter how much people like you, eventually you got to get to the tournament, and if that doesn't happen, then we'll see how it goes. Okay, Michigan State. Everybody's retiring in college basketball. It's a fashionable thing to do if you're a famous coach approaching your mid to late 60s, early 70s. Everybody's leaving the sport. Not Tom Izzo, man. He's still here. Every year it feels like people think he's going to retire, and maybe last year if he'd won a title, he would have rode off into the sunset. Maybe not. Who knows? But he's back, and with a team that could be potentially elite defensively and on the glass again, but that I am very concerned will not be able to score the basketball basically at all. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I have similar vibes. I think I was, I along with a lot of people, but I was very wrong about Michigan State last year. I will fully own that, and I'm willing to be wrong about them again this year. I think they're still a quality Big Ten team. I think they're still probably a tournament team. I don't think right. I don't really see them like competing for a Big Ten championship. Kind of, in that I see them in that 5 to 9 probably area of the Big Ten where it's like, yeah, nobody actually wants to play them, but they're also not. I don't think they're gonna be as good as last year, which I don't think that's a hot take in itself. But
and last year was a bit of an outlier from the past 5-6 years under Izzo, right? Like a lot of stuff came together for them last year, and they had a great year, and it was a fun year. Fans loved it, whatever. If and it kind of made me look dumb too, because I wrote a column, would have been, I think, in the 23-24 season, probably, when they got off to a bad start. And it was just sort of like, is Tom Izzo kind of, like, it wasn't like a hot take, like, is this guy's washed? But it was just sort of like, he might be on his, like, tail end of his career. You see this with guys. You get a little further along in the career, and what used to be a number 2 seed, number 3 seed, number 4 seed is now 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 playing in the first 4 type of thing. And then last year, of course, he got back to being one of the best teams in the Big Ten and a number 2 seed and all that good stuff. But it wouldn't be a shocker if it went back to 7 seed, 9 seed type of situation this year.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I see them more because, right, you return Fears, Carr, Kohler, Cooper, like that gives you an automatic floor, along with Tom Izzo being the coach. And even if he isn't maybe prime Tom Izzo, he's still one of the best coaches in the Big Ten, right? There's probably the only one I would say consensus people would take over him is Matt Painter at this point. And even that, I'm sure people would argue against that too. And fair enough, it's Tom Izzo. But there's legitimate questions, right? Offensively, it's all offseason. All I'm hearing is Cohen Carr is going to be the guy. Maybe he will be, and if he is, that does solve some stuff. I need to see it before I fully believe it. Right, he's going to play the 3, I assume, alongside Kohler and Cooper to start out. Fears can knock down a 3, but he can't really teams are going to live with him shooting from 3. Carr, Kohler, Cooper. Kohler knocked him down on lower. What was he? He was 37% on 51 attempts. So like, if that bumps up and teams respect him more, cool. Trey Ford and Kurtang are the shooters. Like there is legitimate spacing concerns and right, unless somebody like Kurtang kind of or Trey Ford emerges as a Jace Richardson type, they lost Jaden Akins, Jace Richardson, Trey Holloman, and regardless of how much people want to lead into whether that's big or not, like. I think that's a really big deal, both offensively and defensively. I think that this is a team defensively that was anchored more on the perimeter with what they were able to do, just creating havoc and causing disruption there. Cooper is a solid rim protector and so it's not like he's going to be terrible. I don't know. They were number 2 in defensive 3-point percentage last season. Like you expect that to regress a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that's a noisy stat, but like. It fits with what Michigan State did defensively last year. You know True. What I mean? Like that stat is always kind of like, maybe that's a causation correlation type of thing, but like they got after it on the defensive perimeter last year. And you have guys like Richardson who, at his size with his wingspan, maybe not the best fundamentals defender of all time or whatever, but like is a really difficult person to have guarding you just from a physical standpoint for most Big Ten guards.
Yeah, for sure. And like they lose a lot of that of even Holloman Akins too. Like those were all good perimeter defenders. Now Fears, I think he's a very good perimeter defender, so he's there. Trey Forts, I'm gonna pull up, I actually forget how I had his defensive rating ranked, but like right, it's not like he's like a standout defender by any means. It's going to be, I think, a little bit more on like, all right, Cooper has to be a 20 to 25 minute a game rim protector. Kohler probably has to take a jump up in that area. Yeah, I don't have Trey Fort's defense ranked all that well. This is going to be a team again by committee, and that's where am very much willing to acknowledge like I could just be wrong because it's like no, it's Tom Izzo, and they're going to have like 7-8 really good players. And that just can kind of work together. The bench is unproven. Doesn't mean it can't be good. It is very unproven, right? If you're projecting the starting 5 to be Fears, Ford, Carr, Kohler, Cooper, that means your bench, really the only one that's played any sort of college basketball is Divine Ugochukwu, who played for Miami last year. And if you want to count that as playing college basketball or not, I think that's up to you. There's just a lot of questions for me. It's like I'm stuck in honestly, because I've been thinking about them a decent bit for the last month, and I go into the cycle of I look at their roster and I'm like, isn't that like an awesome roster? Like it'll be good, but not like great. I'm like, yeah, they can't be that good. And then I'm like, well, I kind of thought that last year too, and they ended up being awesome. And then I was like, well, Tom Izzo is their coach, but then I look at their roster again, and it's just this cycle that I'm stuck in.
Right. Well. He's proven us wrong before. He may do it again. We'll see how it goes. Okay, next tier is the steady tier, very creatively named by me. I've got Wisconsin and Oregon here. Oregon we kind of touched on earlier with Shellstad and Biddle and their lineup numbers. If Evans plays alongside them, they are apparently unstoppable and will win the national title. So we can focus on Wisconsin in this tier. Obviously, they've got Blackwell coming in. I like Andrew Rohde. I covered him kind of in detail at Virginia. He never really got it going there until last year. And then when he did, it fell kind of by the wayside, I think, in terms of, sort of national attention or evaluation of his season, just because they were so bad. And like everyone was just kind of like, even Virginia fans were checked out on that team last year, kind of halfway through the season. But he figured it out last year. I think that's a good transfer, like from kind of that area, and makes sense stylistically. And if he shoots it like he did at Virginia last year on a bad team, I think Wisconsin's kind of got a under the radar nice addition there.
Yeah, and I'm kind of going with that. Like, I really do like their guard room. Like Boyd, Blackwell, and Rhodey. Those are three guys. It's like, yeah, like that. I think that's a very, very good trio, especially as we've seen in this Wisconsin system over the last couple of years. Like, wings just kind of eat in this roster.
Yeah.
I'm very excited for Boyd because, one, I think Boyd's a good player. Two, I think it allows Blackwell to be more of a pure scorer where he's at his best, right? Blackwell was the one that kind of had to initiate, and Tanjay was the scorer. Now, Wisconsin's offense has become this kind of continuity style ball screen that I don't think needs a point guard as much as most other offenses. But still, Blackwell can be the one that kind of gets going scoring wise. I think that's a very good trio in the backcourt where all three guys can shoot, can drive, can pass. Defense, a little bit of question, but even like I think Boyd and Blackwell can be solid enough there. And then Winter, right? Winter's kind of the guy that's like, oh, if he takes a big leap, you have a really good quartet of players in a Wisconsin system that has done very well. I think this roster suits what they want. I'm pretty high on Wisconsin. There was at one point in the offseason I had them as the second best team in the Big Ten. I don't have them there anymore. But I just think, especially for regular season, like Greg Gard is just a good coach. I think he's just going to figure it out. I've counted them out a couple times and I shouldn't have, especially last season.
Yeah.
And I'll be wrong going the other way. I'll be fine overhyping Wisconsin this season. They don't live up to it, but I'm not going to be under excited, under ranking them going into the season.
Right. I mean, and it's a good call out on Winter because talk about like a program that has a long and illustrious history of elevating promising freshmen and sophomores who kind of, integrate in their sophomore year and are like look pretty good, and they have solid efficiency numbers, but it's relatively low volume, and then their junior and senior year are like the best player on the court. Like they Greg Gard, Bo Ryan before him did that year over year, and you have to give credit to Gard, I think, also for adjusting their approach a little bit. I think like they had significant transfer portal losses in recent seasons, and there was some question there about like if Wisconsin was going to kind of go the way of Virginia, where like the whole model is about long-term player development and systemic integration over time. And, you bring in Tanji and, and he's one of the best players in the Big Ten. And you pepper in more, you retain and you keep the core of your team, but you pepper in more guys than you would have 6-7 years ago. And I think Gard has sort of adapted without losing his sort of grip on the program in the same way that that maybe other coaches have struggled with. So, I think you're right. Last year was a really good reminder of like, this is a good program. This is a good coach. The team, like, set your floor pretty high for them on an annual basis, and you'll probably be right more often than not. Okay, next tier is the Chad Baker Mazzara Forever tier. My guy continues to play college basketball. His response to Bruce Pearl leaving on Instagram, I don't know if people saw it, was not the most magnanimous. Chad Baker Mazzara is just a one-of-a-kind individual who I think, combined with Musselman, makes for a potentially explosive situation at various points throughout the year. The two of them will absolutely get mad at each other. There will be footage playing on like a Big Ten wrap-up show of them screaming at each other. take the over at like 5 times probably. That doesn't mean it won't work though. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean it won't work. And let's be honest, like early in the transfer portal, like the existence of immediate eligibility in the transfer portal, the 2021 through 2022, 23 seasons, whatever, Musselman was kind of out on the front of that. Of like, yeah, I'll recycle my roster every year. I don't care. Like, I used to coach in the CBA, and I would switch up my players like every 2 weeks. Like, I would get rid of my entire roster and bring other guys in because I like tinkering. I like figuring it out. And so he's done that a bit again this year. But you actually look at the talent on the roster, and you kind of think they have a chance to get back. You know, his program now at USC, previously at Arkansas, has a chance to get back to some of those better Arkansas teams where maybe early in the year you didn't quite see it, but by the time it got to December, early January, you're like, oh yeah, this Arkansas team's really good.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I think that's the exact comparison. I think we seem pretty in step on USC. I have them kind of right in that middle area. Um, they are going to have length everywhere. Outside of Jordan Marsh, only scholarship player, or no, there's no scholarship player outside of Jordan Marsh listed under 6'5" on the roster. Right, Rodney Rice, Chad Baker-Mazara is your 1-2 punch in the backcourt. That's going to be fun. It is going to be a little bit of a puzzle piece together because I don't think neither are natural kind of lead point guards, but both can do it when asked to. You got some and Musselman, I think last year, right? Because USC's defense was pretty bad. What were they? They were 14th in the Big Ten, 88th overall. And I think Musselman kind of was just like, yeah, never again. Like we're not doing that again. We'll figure it out offensively. That's fine. We are not going to be bad defensively. And he went out like, I think Rodney Rice is a positive defender. Chad Baker-Mazara is good. Jacob like you look at kind of the bigs and forwards that he got of Kofi. Gabe Dines is a 7'5" dude who's going to block shots. Amari Dickerson is going to be one of my favorite defenders to watch in the entire conference. Like there is athletes and there is length everywhere, and I expect them to try to cause havoc. And at times it's going to be a little bit ugly because the offense might be a bit clunky, but they're also going to have dudes that can just go create, led by Baker-Mazara, as I kind of keep bringing up. But Rice is, I loved Rice at Maryland. I'm excited to see him in an expanded role. Jacob Kofi is, I think, very quietly a year 2 breakout candidate. I really like the film from what he was able to put up during his freshman season at Virginia, and I kind of like how he fits with this roster. So I think there is a lot to like. To me, USC is one of the wider range of outcome teams in the Big Ten, where it's like, if they're a top 20 team, wouldn't shock me. If they're, a 65th KenPom team, also like wouldn't completely shock me.
Right. No, yeah, completely. It's a very new roster, largely. And the best player from last year, they're sort of go to high usage in terms of possessions anyway. Player Desmond Claude is no longer here, so it's a very new look. And again, this has become much more common, but this is the kind of thing Musselman used to do back when it was still like there were a lot of coaches figuring out like, oh, how do we do this? Like, do I take a couple guys from the portal or do I rebuild my roster all year? This is all so new. And when Musselman was just like, I'll do it. I'll take 8 new guys every year and just figure it out. And it usually at Arkansas it works. Not every time. They had a couple down years there, but for the most part, he would figure it out. And a couple program stalwarts here and there, but generally speaking, he was willing to have his teams look very different every year. Speaking of different looking teams, our next tier is new coaches, new rosters, fascinating transitions. Again, I gotta. These tiers are not super well named. I'll maybe for the written version on my newsletter, I'll maybe workshop some of these tier names. But like I said, it does what it says on the tin. We've got Iowa, Indiana, Maryland. I think Iowa is going to be really fun to watch, even though they're slow. Just because I think putting Bennett Sturts and Ben McCollum into a world where there's other high major basketball players on the roster is going to be fun. And I mean, I'm extremely curious for your take on Indiana. not as just as a Purdue fan, but as a trying to understand what this team is actually going to look like. So let's talk Iowa and Indiana, and then we can talk a little bit about the new paradigm at Maryland as well.
Yeah, Iowa and Indiana, I think they're pretty similar to me. Stylistically, they're going to be very different, but in terms of like output, I have them right. This KenPom ranking thing that I keep talking about, like I had them 2 spots apart. I had their offense and their defense nearly identical. I think both the offenses should be much better than the defenses. I think there's probably a higher ceiling defensively for Iowa just because McCollum's just a good defensive coach, and DeVries is as well. So don't get me wrong there. But starting with Iowa, right, starts like he's awesome.
Good player.
He is going to be
good
so much fun to watch.
Bennett Sturtz, very good.
I think that's a very good take right there. Bennett Sturtz good at basketball. Probably could just end it there. It's going to be I loved watching the film this offseason where it's a possession of like, all right, pick and roll, nothing happens. Sturtz kicks, immediately gets the ball back, pick and roll. All right, drive, reset, pick and roll. Like where he touches the ball for 25 seconds and then they get a wide open layup because I like, and they might play a little bit faster this year. But I do like that bet that they have, especially right. This team has more Big Ten talent. It's still not the most pure talented Big Ten team, especially as you get into the depth. But right, they recognize, hey, we have Sturtz. Like, and basically the bet that they make is, all right, sure, maybe defenses, you can guard us for the first 10 seconds. Like you can guard this first pick and roll against us. We're not overly athletic against you or anything. Can you guard 5 in a row where there's also off-ball action in between and we're bringing different people into it? Can you do all that in a 25-second span and then also go get the board? I like that bet that McCollum has made with his system of like, yeah, I'm just going to trust my guys to go do it because eventually they are going to figure something out. Now it is like Sturtz has to be awesome, simply put. Like if he isn't the Bennett Sturtz that we know, this can get off the rails pretty quickly. But there is a little bit more of I guess, insurance blanket type thing with Fulgaris. I like Hausen's fit as just a pure shooter. And side note, his no dip threes, love them, where he just catches the ball at his face and just immediately lets it fly, no dip. The wing and forward room is going to be the big question, right? Yeah. Trey Thompson reclassified up. I think the talent wise, he's arguably a Big Ten center. Big Ten starter. Does it transfer right away for somebody that reclassified up? Those are always questions. They brought their Banks and Manuwa over, who I like as kind of the rollers and short rollers. I have to talk about Trevin Urick really quick. He's jumped. He went from unranked to I think he's like 120 or something like that now, over the course of the last month in ratings. And the 247 ratings. I don't care about ratings too much. Dude should never have been unranked. I assume it was just because people probably couldn't see him. I don't know what his role is this year. I'm just going to put it out there. He's a guy that's like his ceiling is Big Ten Player of the Year. He does stuff at his size that just you don't find. His passing, his ball handling, his creation. Again, I don't know if it translates year one. But they're like, so getting back to this year's roster, like there is enough talent elsewhere surrounding Sturtz that it's like, yeah, this offense should be good. Now they're going to be a bit undersized. Similar to Indiana, like, is the rim protection going to be there? I don't know, but they're going to be fun.
Yeah. Just want to give people another plug for the site because our guy Will Warren wrote a piece called Corn Math, which I thought was a good title, about how Drake last year, their turnover rate looked high if you just looked at pure turnover rate, like on KenPom. But when you actually dig into what those turnovers were, tons of them were shot clock violations. And so their live ball turnovers basically not never, but they had a fairly low rate of live ball turnovers that are the kind that turn into layups on the other end more frequently. But when they did commit a turnover, it's because the shot clock went down, and then they walked back down the floor and got set in their defense and repeated the thing of like what you were talking about is like you guard the ball screen well, guard another ball screen well, guard another ball screen well, and the shot clock's running down, and now we're going to get our look. And they're just the entire system with Sturtz on the ball And who knows, maybe, I mean, I think Ben McCollum's history at different levels of the sport suggest that it will work with other guards, but the pairing of him and Sturts is lethal and something that most teams just don't have to deal with on a nightly basis. And I think there's a lot of delta in that of like, um, you just are not used to guarding this kind of offense with the same repeatability over and over again, that takes you deep into shot clocks every single time they have the ball. So it's going to be an adjustment for coaches in the Big Ten, and I think Iowa, again, they're going to play maybe not as slow as they did at Drake. They'll probably be in that milieu again, but there's just really fun to watch because Sturts is so good, and because it's very rare to watch Sturts possession under Ben McCollum for Drake and probably now for Iowa, where the right decisions aren't made most every time down the floor. It's just kind of it's like a satisfying viewing experience. We're just like, yep, that was the exact right play, and that's what you did. And I'm sitting on my couch at home, and I have nothing to criticize. So it's kind of like an enjoyable experience relative to sometimes you're sitting there watching the game and be like, dude, what are you doing? Why are you running this? What is the set here? Or why is that player shooting that? Whatever. Iowa is probably not going to do very much of that, and their fans will probably really enjoy it. Okay. Indiana.
Yeah, really quick.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, really quick. Just I think like the casual Iowa fan who just like once basketball season's done, doesn't really think about it until it comes up. They're in for whiplash when they're from Fran McCaffrey going to this offensive system this year. In a good way, I think. I think it'll be fun, but they're going to be like,
I think,
what is this?
I think Iowa fans got a little bit fatigued with the Fran thing, even though it was fun to watch. It's just like, it's fun to watch, but like, we don't guard anybody, and we kind of just do the same thing every year, and our offenses are usually really efficient, but it doesn't take us deep into the tournament or whatever. So what's the point after a while? Even though I think Fran did a really good job there, and they were much more successful throughout his tenure than Iowa had been for a while. So sometimes it's just time to, things just get a little stale. It's time to move on. And it will be a whiplash, but probably, like you said, in a positive direction. Okay, Indiana. This is a roster I've spent a lot of time thinking about. Obviously, I went to Indiana. And most listeners will be aware of that, but it's a roster that I think will produce some very fun basketball. In theory, it's again speaking of whiplash, going to be very different from the Mike Woodson tenure and from the tenure that preceded him with Miller, and just like Indiana's going to shoot threes now, and that's going to be good. That helps. Not shooting threes in 2025 or whatever, not a particularly great strategy unless you have some other concept of how you want the game of basketball to work. I'm not sure they really ever had that under Woodson, other than, hey, Trace, you're like the best player in the country, so can you just go do some stuff now? And that worked out well for a year or two. But so what do you make of the construction here? I think you mentioned it earlier. Rim protection, size, the front court is maybe a little dodgy, and you wonder if there was another guy out there, just a body even, to come in and be like a conventional forward, big guy, rim runner type. But in terms of shooting the ball, spacing the floor, should be a very different looking team.
Yeah, I'm so starting with that, right? Lots of shooting, lots of spacing. Tucker DeVries is going to fire them up. Lamar Wilkerson as well. Like those two, I mean, I don't know how many threes they could put up combined this year, but it's going to be multiple hundreds, that's for sure. Reed Bailey, I love, is like this connecting big that can facilitate, can kind of just do a little bit of everything offensively. He's really skilled, and there's a lot of skill offensively. Tane Conaway kind of being the lead facilitator and creator. They do not have a lot of size, and the size that they do have is unproven or on the smaller side still. Only two guys at 6'10" on the roster, and then even them, like Reed Bailey and Andrei Asimovich, not like the biggest bodies in the world either. But also they're going to have a lot of wings, so it's a little bit of a give and take where they'll have positional size in the backcourt, but not in the front court. Offensively, like, it's going to be fun. This is going to be a team that they have four very skilled players in Conaway, Wilkerson, DeVries, and Bailey that I trust to provide a very good offense. right? Where this should be, I think, a pretty good mix of pick and roll and also kind of some of the off-ball movement. You would saw DeVries ran at Drake for Tucker and kind of using him in that high post area. Bailey's a guy that can probably be used in that type of look too. I'm concerned about the depth. I like Trent Sisley, and I see the upside for a lot of the other guys. I just don't know if it for sure hits. But the big thing is going to be defensively, right? Tane Connerway, awesome defender. He's the best defender on the team. He might be the one that's like most responsible for whether Indiana has defensive success, just because like I'm concerned about the front court defense. But if Connerway is just ripping guys the ball handler anyways, then I guess it doesn't matter. But right, Sam Alexis, Andre Osimovic, Josh Harris, like Reed Bailey. I think Alexis is the best rim protector out of the bunch, and I'm very curious to see kind of what they do for their lineups. Does Alexis start and you slide Bailey to the 4 and DeVries to the 3? Or do you go for more skill with DeVries at the 4, Bailey at the 5, and bring in, Trent Sisley, Connor Enright, Jason Drake, one of those guys in, and kind of just go all out on skill on offense. So there's lineup versatility. There's going to be movement offensively. Regardless of the season, I think those are just positive things for Hoosier fans, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's going to be interesting. It's just going to be fun to watch Tucker DeVries play basketball again, because we missed out on him last year, and I think that's a really fun guy to watch play. If you never watched him play at Drake, go back and look at, there's YouTube clips you can find of his games in various Valley tournament settings where he is, playing against like a generational Indiana State team and just running the game. He's a really, really good player. And I think part of the thing that I've kind of had to combat in analyzing Indiana's transfer portal is like, if Tucker DeVries wasn't Darian DeVries' son, and it wasn't just understood that he's going to play wherever Darian DeVries is the coach, if Indiana got Tucker DeVries as a transfer, it's like, whoa, like that's one of the best transfer gets you can find in the country. But because it's just like, yeah, well, his dad got the job, and so he's going to play there. It maybe didn't get quite the like reception that like, Donovan Dent going to UCLA would, or whatever. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating year at Indiana. I'm sure I'll talk about Indiana a lot because the transition from Mike Woodson to Darian DeVries, who is not like in the Dusty May tier of proven coaches, but is probably a tier below and a very competent lifelong college basketball grinder in a lot of ways, and has been an assistant for forever, and has been a part of good programs. You just kind of look at it and think like, that might actually be kind of what Indiana needs right now. It's just like, have a really competent guy who plays a modern style of basketball and let the chips fall where they may. Okay, Maryland is next on this. Obviously, another transition. Speaking of Indiana, Miles Rice from last year's Indiana team is probably the best player on this roster. I don't know what you think about that, but it's, he's going to play a big role for Buzz Williams in year one.
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, if we're going best player, I would go Pharrell Payne.
Okay,
I'm very high in Pharrell. Excited to be able to watch him again, coming back to the Big Ten. Obviously, was at Minnesota, then went to A&M, and now following Buzz. This feels very much just like last year's Texas A&M team. Maybe not quite as good. I don't think they'll be as good as last year's Texas A&M team, but kind of
be as horrible to watch.
Yes, but I'm looking forward to it because, like, man, it is. I can truthfully say it's ugly. I know it's ugly. It is.
It's literally like, just missed shots, offensive rebounds, and like insane defense. It's effective, but you're just like, oh, okay.
I will like. I love watching them offensive rebound because I've never seen a team do it the way they do. Where
they're lunatics.
Like the shot goes up and they like. I don't know how much time Buzz must spend drilling them on like, all right, when the shot goes up from here, one of you is here, one of you is here. They like form a triangle anywhere from 4 to 10 feet out, depending on like the length of the shot from the rim. Right, longer shots are going to produce longer bounces, so then they're further away from the rim, and you just got dudes that are animals down low that are just willing to bruise and go get boards. Solomon Washington, Pharrell Payne. I don't know if they'll be like, I mean, 41.4% offensive rebounding percentage last year is nuts. Also crazy that was worse than the previous year. Maybe they're not quite that good, but the year before that they were 36.7 at A&M. I think somewhere in that area makes sense. It isn't pretty.
They
It can
rebounded
be
all the
ugly.
they got all those offensive rebounds last year and still ranked 42nd offensively in adjusted efficiency because they shot 315th in effective field goal, 30.7% from 3, 48.6% from 2, 69% from the free throw line. Like just an all-time miss, rebound, miss, rebound, miss, rebound, miss, rebound. Eventually we get a layup and a putback team. Like
Yeah.
beyond like breaking the Buzz is and always has been a guy who's very attuned to like what are the margins? How can we win? Like what are the little things we can do with this group of players to like get half a percentage point of adjusted efficiency, like whatever his goal is metrically or whatever. He's very on top of the metrics and always has been. And yeah, I just think he realized like we can create a model for rebounding the basketball on the offensive end that like helps us not be terrible offensively, even though we can't shoot the ball to save our life.
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of the same this year. Now, Darius Adams, assuming he's healthy and all that, like he's somebody that can go be a bucket getter. Rice and Watts, like I don't know, this feels like last year's Texas A&M team, but just not quite as talented, right? Where Rice and Watts fill maybe that Taylor and Phelps role. I don't think either. Maybe I think Watts could maybe be close to as good as one of those two. Right? You bring in Washington, you bring in Payne, even some of the other bigs like Metcalf, Saunders, like they're just going to kind of do their jobs. A bunch of super athletic wings and like Passmore and Turkson redshirted last year and followed him over. And there's just a lot of length and athleticism everywhere. This defense should be good, right? Just energy, havoc, high hedge. Like we are going to force you to shoot a lot of threes and just be uncomfortable doing so. The offense remains to be seen, I guess. If they're elite offensive rebounding, there is some floor that just naturally comes with that. But I think Payne is a guy that needs to like really really be kind of the guy of like a all Big Ten type guy. He can do it defensively. He can anchor. He's a monster on the glass. They would run stuff for him last year offensively where he'd ISO kind of at the elbow. I'm excited to see that. They're kind of in that. They're the opposite end of it compared to like Indiana and Iowa, but they're in that similar mix of like, hey, they're probably going to be really good at or pretty good at one side of the ball. The other side of the ball is a big question mark. Maryland's not going to be nearly as fun to watch as either Indiana or Iowa, but right. I think Terrapin fans probably have to feel solid with the offseason.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the hire is good too. Like Buzz is he's gonna win games there. Like it may
Yeah.
not be right away, but he essentially always gets his programs into a place where they're going to be in the tournament pretty regularly. I just want to note this really quickly. Wade Taylor shot 223 threes last season and made 71 of them. Um, and Phelps shot 135 and made 35. Like
How easy of a recruiting pitch does Buzz Williams have? To
Miles Rice
these,
must be like, oh, this is perfect.
yeah,
Like
Isaiah
I
Watts,
get to
like
shoot as much as I want. It doesn't matter if they go in.
yeah,
Amazing.
like just play good defense and I can just put up literally whatever I want.
Yeah, we'll clean it up afterwards, man. It doesn't matter what part of
Yeah,
the rim it hits. We'll figure it out.
just get it
Um,
up there.
yeah, it will be interesting to see, and that Texas A&M style was an evolution for Buzz, and he developed it over the last few years. He may have another trick up his sleeve as time goes on at Maryland too. They may not look like those A&M teams forever either. We'll see how it goes. A team that does play nice offense and has the past couple years in the next tier here, the I'm intrigued tier is Nebraska. They have become a annually pretty enjoyable watch, at least for me. Maybe on the back line and defensively not quite there, but the stuff that Hoiberg runs, I think, is pretty up there, and I think has generally created an offense that takes good shots. I mean, they had a few games last year where they were just kind of untouchable on the offensive end. And some of the, the details around the margins in terms of defense and rebounding may not be there, but in terms of setting guys up for good looks on offense, Nebraska is fun, and they could do a similar version of that, maybe even a slightly elevated version of it this year.
Yeah, I mean it's a big question, obviously with Bryce Williams gone, but I think getting Rick
He
Moss
was so
back,
good last year, by the way. Just
so
to
good.
pause on him, he had a run through the Big Ten where he was like the best
Yeah,
player in the country.
yeah, he was so much fun to watch. I obviously Mass had a red shirt because of the injury, but I so wish he was on that last year's. That I think Mass with last year's team, like Nebraska is a tourney team, although forever will be the crown first ever crown winner, so can't take that away from the Cornhuskers.
It's big time.
It is. No, I've enjoyed watching what Fred Hoiberg has done. Where I think him and maybe Chris Collins are kind of the ultimate guys right now in the Big Ten. Of they have a system and it's going to find some level of success. Maybe it caps their ceiling, but it's harder. I find it harder to believe that Nebraska is going to go back to their sub 100 KenPom teams that Hoiberg had the first couple years. With offensively, it is so much off-ball movement and handoffs, and now Mass back is like he can be the leader of the offense. They're a team that doesn't have a true point guard, but doesn't really need it because of kind of what they're able to do and how they utilize their bigs and handoffs. And you're going to have at least one elite shooter on the floor at all times with Sejan and Sanford. And I'm sure you could play them both together. I really like some of the pickups they had on the margins. It's maybe not the flashiest pickups in the world, but they're guys that kind of fit. Like Kendall Blue is a guy that fits. Jamarcus Lawrence obviously fits because he played there for 2 years before transferring out and now transferring back. And there's just guys that just willing to kind of do their job with like Sam Hoiberg and Braden Frager is getting all this offseason buzz as this athletic forward. I don't know if they're a team that can be elite in either offense or defense, at least metrics wise, but I think they can be solid in both areas and just kind of have a solid year, right? I think they're going to be a bit underranked probably going into the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bart's early metrics projections have them in like the mid 40s, which
I feel
that seems fair to me. Like I don't look at that and think I would swerve from that a little bit, whatever. Similarly speaking, Washington, he has it 47th, which we talked about Washington somewhat at the top of the show, just an interesting coaching situation with Ryan Sprinkle there. But they've got Desmond Claude, who transferred from USC, Frank Kepnang, who I think is like a fun, useful player to have as a kind of, his fundamentals and like positioning have never been great, but as like an athletic guy who can just do stuff, he's pretty fun. Last year was okay. They did lay, they laid out in the transfer market to a considerable level. Didn't quite play out, but also I just called him Ryan Sprinkle. It's Danny Sprinkle. So
I didn't even catch that.
I do this all the time. Like I just mess people's names up. I did it earlier with Niederhauser. I called him Niedermeyer or something like that. This is literally like a daily thing that I do in my own life as well. Just on a personal basis, I mess up people's names. I call them Tom when their name is like Tim or whatever. Anyway, Washington. What do you make here? Because like the actual roster, obviously, we talked about the coaching setup and the stakes of the season. But what do you make of this actual team?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of, and not because I'm lower on Ohio State. I think they're similar to Ohio State to me. Of like, hey, this offense should be really good and really fun. No clue if they're going to be able to defend a single person, but offensively they should be fun. And you mentioned Kepnang. I think I think there's an argument he's their X factor because he can at least protect the rim.
He can.
I don't know if I trust anybody really, at least out of their starting group defensively. Yates is solid, and Claude can be fine. But Kapnagi is somebody that can cover up a lot of holes. Obviously, he has to stay healthy, and that's been a big thing in his career.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of talent. Like I think Wesley Yates is like I think Wesley Yates is the best player on the roster. I think he should be the guy, and if he is the guy, that means Claude is your second or third option, and I think that's an awesome role for him. Obviously, Steinbach has gotten all of the hype this offseason, a potential one and done type guy. I'm curious to see how he fits because I think right he is somebody that maybe a little bit on the skinnier side, kind of can play the four, maybe the five. There's talk of him at the three. I don't buy that. But there's a lot of skill on this team between Yates, Claude, Peterson, Ognosovich, Steinbach. And some younger guy. Like I think they have a good blend of younger guys and like Mendikid and Diallo and guys like that combined with some upperclassmen that just makes it for a fun roster. I expect this roster to look much better offensively than what Washington did last season. Like I said, defensively, I still have a lot of questions, but I don't know. It should be good offensively. Like you bring Yates and Claude, and it's so interesting to me because it's like it's not like they had success at USC as a team, but individually they did, and so Sprinkle's just kind of betting like, all right, let's surround him with better pieces, and things should be good.
Yeah. Again, weird year for them last year, especially given like the Osobor transfer cost was like one of the headlines of last year's offseason. It was like, oh, this guy's like going for $2 million or whatever. And then you look back at his season and it was just like up there with Kansas State and Coleman Hawkins of just because a guy is really good. You can't just throw money at someone unless you have a plan to really surround them, particularly at programs like your Kansas States and your Washingtons, where you kind of have to hit on your outcomes to be really good. And you're not going to be able to necessarily have a roster of 3 or 4 of those guys. You have the one that you're really locked in on. That guy has to be a star, and it didn't happen last year. But I agree that this roster looks like lessons were learned in terms of resource allocation, and it's spread a little bit more widely. And I agree with the USC thing of like that team was just kind of a mess last year, but I don't know that those guys were primarily responsible for that. So let's see how it goes. What do you make of Northwestern? Obviously, you mentioned it a little bit earlier in terms of like system in place, kind of know what you're going to get every year, but they have had some losses personnel wise. I mean, Barnhizer got drafted, which was honestly great to see. Watching the second round of the draft, it was like, hey, there he is, Barnhizer. Nick Martinelli's back. I think the talent is maybe on a slight downgrade here from last year, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Martinelli is awesome. He's very good offensively, and he's going to kind of have to lead that. Really like KJ Wyndham. I think he's a guy that can break out in year 2, show really good flashes towards the end of the season as well. They have a really big freshman class, 5 players, and I expect at least one of them to start, probably Trey Singleton, if I were to guess. Tyler Kropp is also somebody to keep an eye on. I don't know. It just feels like I buy Chris Collins as a very good coach. He's been at Northwestern for a while, has had success. I don't think the talent's there as some of those recent years, but there's enough talent that they shouldn't like bottom out of the Big Ten. Defensively, they're going to have their work cut out for them. Right, they're generally a high hedge team, lots of defensive rotations. It's subdued a little bit, but generally want to force threes a lot of the time. I don't know if they have the best individual defenders. It defensively feels very much just has to be kind of done by team, and offensively, you know what you're getting from Martinelli. Just makes the most random shots I've ever seen. Just you need a couple other guys to step up, whether that is Reed and Wyndham. Max Green I think has good skill offensively. Singleton or Kropp, one of those freshmen could pop. There's enough pieces to be like, oh yeah, this team could be feisty. It's also concerning that, right, if things don't really work, that this team could end up being, one of the bottom three teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I've got them in the rankings. Although, in the mega conference era, being one of the 4 or 5 worst teams in the Big Ten might mean you're ranked like 65th in
Yeah.
adjusted efficiency or whatever. So it's not necessarily saying that team's not going to be good. It just means you might be 16 and 17 or whatever at the end of the year. Yeah, maybe Northwestern defensively will look like even more like a classic Big Ten, keep everything in front, and get lucky with some outcomes, some missed open threes, and just kind of scheme it that way. Okay, so the next tier I have is obvious good hire, but maybe a year away. That's Minnesota. Wondering what you think of actually Minnesota's talent, because I as the title of the tier implies, like I think this is a perfectly sensible hire, makes a ton of sense. It's a hard place to win, and I think Richard Pitino's years there, people will maybe look back on a little bit more fondly after the years that came after. But I'm not sure that they have the pieces to like compete in the top half or 2/3 of the Big Ten right away here. Even if they had an okay year last year, like shout out to Ben Johnson, they weren't terrible. They were a credible member of the conference, but it was the right time for a change, and I do think there's some upside there, but it's probably more in the long term.
I agree there. I think this roster specifically, like there are some pieces. Chainsey Willis, I like Asama. I'm pretty high on Nehemiah Turner as their incoming center, who's going to be a sophomore. I think he should probably just be the starter and kind of get him as many reps as possible. But this is definitely a team that I think fits what Nico Medved's going to want to do offensively. Defensively, I have concerns, and right, Turner's a good shot blocker. I don't know if they have a ton of lateral speed on the perimeter, but there's enough skill. Like this team should be, I think, pretty enjoyable to watch, even if they're not competing in the middle of the Big Ten. Uh, there's still enough talent between Willis, Asama, and Durkin, K. Tyson. Like there's enough guys and some guys that can maybe be breakout type players that it's like, oh yeah, there should be. I think for me, the goal for Minnesota this year is just being like, okay, there's signs that this is going to work. Whether it fully works this year or not, whatever. But I think there should be signs that like, okay, yeah, I see where this can go in the next year or two.
Yeah, and you look at Medved, his history at Colorado State. First year preseason KenPom ranked 200, finished 180. Second year preseason rank 159, finished 99th. Third year finished preseason rank was 116, finished 76th. 72, 46 the fourth year. Bit of a dip in 2023, and then went to the tournament 2 more times. Like that's the trajectory you're looking for. Is whatever they end up ranked in KenPom, there's a pretty good chance Medved is going to hit or exceed it, and then you feel great about your hire and you move on to the next season. And it's not to write off the whole year. Maybe they'll surprise us. Who knows? I'm not like trying to completely dismiss Minnesota, but I do think that is the sort of broader storyline with the program, right? Is like develop, see some pieces in place, maybe exceed your preseason expectations, and then you go from there. Okay, Rutgers. I have them in the return to defense with a question mark tier because, what is Rutgers in the Big Ten? They are occasionally putrid offense, but extremely good defense, and sometimes the balance is weighted such that they're like a tournament team. Maybe they have 1 or 2 guys offensively who can get buckets, even though the offensive system isn't working super well, or 2/3 of, 3/5 of what's on the floor offensively can't shoot, or whatever the case may be, right? But they guard so well on a yearly basis under Steve Peichel that's their identity. Last year, obviously, they went in a totally different direction with 2 guys who are lottery picks, and you could see. I feel like you could see like the cellular construction of Rutgers, like Peichel and the staff like struggling to coexist with this idea of like, we just got to let these guys go and play. We got to let Ace Bailey shoot 17-footers over the top of defenders. This is just what he does. It goes in a lot of the time, with the like basically inability to guard last year. And so I'm wondering if you look at this roster and think, obviously it's not nearly as talented at the high end, with the star losses in Harper and Bailey. And maybe you can squint and see like maybe this team can get back to like just we guard like crazy and we'll figure it out. We might rank 280th in offense, but we're so good defensively that we can stay in the mix for like potential tournament bid type deal. Or do you not think it's there?
I mean, I think the ceiling is that they're like a bubble team. I don't expect them to get there.
Yeah.
I don't.
Nor do I, to be clear.
Yeah. Like, I think the defense should be better than last season. I don't think it should be what it was a couple years ago because they had guys like Cliff Amori and, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the wing. Who was they had a really good wing defender. Caleb McConnell. There it is. They had like those types of like defenders. I mean, Caleb McConnell won Defensive Player of the Year. Cliff Amori was like an all defense guy. They don't have
he
those.
was a great defender. Like,
yeah.
Really
Yeah.
solid. Like they would have anywhere between 4 and 5 really good defenders on the floor at any given time.
Yeah, and I don't know if they'll quite have that this year. Like, there's definitely some good defenders: Davis, Grant, Bryce Storch, Ogbley, and Bayfall. Like, can in theory be good defenders. You just kind of need to see it more, especially with Fall, because he hasn't really proven it at all at the college level. There's just like, I don't know. It feels like it's going to be a tough year for Rutgers. Hopefully I'm wrong, because I always like seeing Rutgers do well. I like Peichel. I like kind of the system and how he runs the program. But it's just, you go up and down. It's like what I think will be their two best offensive players in Zerno and Buchanan. I don't know if they're great defenders. And the defenders who are good, Davis, Grant, Dortch, I don't know if they can give you much offensively. And it's just kind of can Peichel really get this team to buy in defensively and just be like, yep, we're going to be awesome defensively. We're going to run in transition, get easy buckets in the half court. Yeah, we'll kind of just throw the ball and see what happens. I mean, there's upside with Buchanan and Zerno, I think, but and some of the freshmen that they have, it's just feels like you got to do a lot of, well, this needs to go right and this needs to go right for them to be like a bubble type team. So it's just, yeah. We'll see what happens.
Maybe it's one of those things where they took this big swing on the Harper Bailey project. It didn't really pan out, and it may take a little time to reorient back toward what the program's identity really has been, which is really, really, really good defending and just okay enough offense that the former is more of what you think about than the latter.
Yeah, and I will add there, with potential changes to eligibility rules, all this, the whole thing might be flipped very quickly in college basketball. But as it stands right now, I believe that they can return every single player from this year's roster. If I have my math correct with Ogbley, he should have one more year. Or no, he might be the only one, regardless. So maybe Ogbley is the only one they can't return.
Right.
So, like, assuming, I know there's probably some people that they will think Peichel's on the hot seat. Maybe he is. I don't know. But if you think that he isn't, like, maybe that this is a team, and if we're going to talk about another team that might be the same way coming up next, maybe this is a team that, just kind of lay the foundation, regroup this year, and next year, hopefully you return the pieces you want to return and can kind of build from there.
Yeah, and that's a good segue to our last team, Penn State. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. Because, look, Penn State finished 6-14 in the Big Ten last year. They went through, they started well in the non-conference. They beat Purdue at home in December. Things were looking promising in terms of tournament potential. And then from January 5th to February 15th went, and I'm looking at it right now, that's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Went 1-11, and then closed the season out by going 3-2. So this was a team with two very good players on it, in Baldwin and Niederhauser. Finished in terms of KenPom in the top 60, with a winning record, and didn't obviously get the payoff of the postseason. Didn't even get in the Big Ten tournament,
Sure.
which is, just as a side note, it's an abomination that the Big Ten and some of these conferences don't just put every team in the conference tournament. Like, what are we doing,
Big,
guys? Like,
Big
I
Ten is
get
this
it.
year.
You have 18 teams now, but that's your own fault. Like, put everyone in the tournament and let them play. Start the conference tournament on Monday if you have to. I don't really care. Anyway, side rant. So it does feel like a bit like that was kind of the year you build to a little bit with those players, and now it's back to, as you mentioned earlier, like almost the first thing we talked about with Mike Rhodes. There's a bit of a rebuild that has to happen, and it kind of looks like he feels like he's going to have the time to do it.
That's the only thing that makes sense when you kind of construct this roster that features 8 freshmen. There are going to be 5 players on this roster that have played college basketball minutes. And Eli Rice played 1 game last year before being hurt, and he was more of an end of the bench piece at Nebraska, so he doesn't have a ton. Dominic Stewart last season for Penn State was back end rotation, sparse minutes. Like, so they really only have 3 guys that have played meaningful college basketball, and Josh Reed, Freddie DeLeon, and Sasa Siani. Yeah, this is a team that I don't know. I don't see the pathway for them being super competitive. Maybe like the only pathway is Mike Rhodes just gets back to like, this is essentially a VCU team of like, you know what, we are just going to be elite defensively. We are going to be not fun offensively, but we're just going to be so good defensively it won't matter. It's there. Caden Mingo is going to be fun. I think Caden Mingo is going to make everybody ask the question of like, does a guy averaging like 18 points a game on a Big Ten team that wins like 2 games, can he win Freshman of the Year? Maybe, I don't know. It depends on how much you care about winning for Freshman of the Year specifically. It's just a roster with a lot of questions up and down the roster, right? Like you outside of Mingo, really, where is creation going to come from? Can they be a team that defensively gets to what Mike Rhodes wants of forcing a lot of turnovers, a lot of pressure, and things like that? Like, I don't think they have like I mean, they have good positional size pretty much everywhere, but it's not like elite. Also, and this is more of I think there are differing opinions on how people view close game results, right? Some can kind of buy like, hey, if you lose a game by 3 points, sometimes it's just a coin flip, or sometimes that's indictment on the coach. Penn State, out of their they had 15 losses last season, 9 of them were by 6 or less points. They were a team that pretty much lost all of their close games, and they've really only had, out of those 15 losses, they only had like 2 or 3 blowouts.
Yeah.
So it's like, is that a Mike Rhodes thing? Is that just the roster was incredibly unlucky and it was more talented than maybe the record indicated? So
Maybe
there's some of that stuff as well.
it would be interesting to hear from like a Penn State basketball sicko on that, who like watched every game and saw the outcomes at the end of every game. Because I'll be honest, like I watched Penn State play a handful of times last year, but I wasn't like watching every single minute of their games, particularly, late, close and late, random games when, let's be honest, there was probably a better game to be watching at that time if Penn State was involved, all due respect. But yeah, it'd be good to hear if there are fans who think like, yeah, we should have won like half of those games, but we didn't because the execution was bad, the play calling was bad, the theory of how to get a bucket was bad, or if it was just, got some open looks, they didn't go in, and the other team came down and hit 2 free throws, and we lose by 5 or 6. I would actually really like to see some feedback on that, because it is an interesting, and we can close with this, it's an interesting conversation in college basketball where you get into the tournament, like who should be in, who should be out, and the metrics look good, but maybe just because your metrics are good, but you lose a lot of games, that's not the thing that again, going back to the very beginning of this discussion that we had about digging in a little bit deeper, just beyond your efficiency metrics or your net number, or like, yeah, you look good on paper and you get, you score points at X rate and you defend them at Y rate. But maybe you lose a lot of close games, and maybe that comes down to it's chance, it's luck, or it's the nitty gritty of execution late in games that separates those teams from the teams that don't get in the tournament.
Yeah, and it's so tough, and it's part of what makes college basketball so fun is like it, there's 31 regular season games, and then postseason is a single elimination format. There's just so much variance at times. Not that it's the cause of everything, right? And you can obviously see their systems that work consistently over and over again. So it's not like everything's just up to luck, but it is some part of it, especially at the college basketball level, more so than like the NBA, right? At game 31 in the NBA, teams are like starting to be like, okay, this is how we're going to play. Game 31 of Big Ten play or college basketball, it's like, all right, this is our last chance to kind of prep for March for our postseason tournament. So it's part of what makes college basketball so fun to me. But also, it is like there's just going to be random things like what happened with Penn State and Mike Rhodes last year of just you lose every single close game, and maybe that's an indictment on you. Maybe you're just the unluckiest team in the country, and not that maybe they should have been a tournament team, but you should have made the Big Ten tournament at least, right? It's I don't know, it's fun.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to find their luck stat on KenPom right now, but let's see, luck Penn State. They ranked 354th.
That checks out to me.
Yeah, there you go. Again, the luck is in KenPom's terms is your record versus your adjusted efficiency performance. Yeah. And again, there can be some nuance in there, but it's an interesting conversation we will continue to have. Joe Jackson was our guest today. We went long. We promised a deep dive. You got a deep dive. Joe does deep dives on all things Big Ten and college basketball at his Substack, feedthepost.substack.com. Also on his YouTube channel, which is also called Feed the Post. Joe, I want to thank you for coming on. This was great, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. This is my first podcast this season or this off season talking like all Big Ten teams. So it was fun to kind of brush it off and then be able to just kind of spew out my thoughts for all 18 teams. I apologize to everybody. I know I ramble. I know I run long on my thoughts. It's just how it works. I did just finished though, like all the team previews. I watched film on every single newcomer, all 171 to the Big Ten this offseason. I just finished writing breakdowns of all 272 players in the Big Ten. So lots of info stored up here that just it got a lot of words to get out to talk about it all. But no, really appreciate you having me on. This was a lot of fun, and always enjoy talking Big Ten hoops.
For sure. Yeah, no, like I said, we promised a deep dive. You delivered for sure. Make sure to check out Joe's work. Make sure to check out Basket Under Review. Check out my newsletter at EamonnBrennan.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Homefield. Thank you to our producer, Corey Aldis. Thank you to the Basket Under Review graphics maestro, Sam Freyer, who does all of the visual work for the site and for the podcast, makes it look really cool. We will be back again next week with another episode. That's our show. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.